people sit back and they go, if I could only be a founder like X, not knowing how it's been artificially constructed. How do you recreate the success that you don't know what you did to get in the first place? The real genius is, can you create that again and again and again and again? I started interviewing hip hop artists for fun. I did Big Sean, Bun B, Talib Kweli, T.I., Jermaine Dupri, DJ Drama. I had a chance to sit down with all these people behind the scenes and understand what's it like when you go from having nothing to 20,000 people at Madison Square Garden cheering your name. What are your thoughts on this? I'm actually curious.
I really deeply believe that all of these things are like external manifestations of really deeper questions about what it means to be a person in relation to other people.
Because there are so many people who've been able to earn so much money, where do you keep your hunger? And how do you keep your hunger? Are you really going to hustle the same way anymore?
Why do you love crypto?
There's no other way to describe it. It is the most cutting edge part of marketing. There's more freedom than any other industry.
And that makes work not feel so much like work. It makes it feel like just another great part of your life that helps like shape who you are and why you're doing what you're doing.
You can take what you've already done that was innovative, throw it away and build something new.
You want to give someone something versus taking something away. Projects underestimate the power of community. Numbers are fake. The only thing that's real is culture and vibes.
Leadership is not a means to an end. It's just a calling on the way to shaping the reality of everyone else. What are you cost signaling? How have you done the hard things to show that you've done the hard things? If you have a cool identity as a brand or anything, and you stick to what your guns are, then eventually it's going to work.
Thank you for doing this, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. This is fun. This was a couple months in the making that we were actually able to work out, right? It was,
Yes.
I don't remember what month it was. Was it May we had a conversation?
I think it was
Right.
May. Yeah. I saw a post of yours talking about your music history and, joining Miden and a few other posts. And I thought there's the way you wrote it was very interesting.
Interesting.
I'm a bit of a collector, right? Some people collect, you're into sneakers and like a bunch of stuff, right?
Mhm.
And I like collecting a bunch of other things, but one of the things I like collecting is linguistic patterns, because in the age of AI and people on social media, and we were just talking earlier about like cultural homogeneity, where everyone kind of talks the same, looks the same, being differentiation's important. The way you write was totally different to anything I'd seen online.
That's interesting.
So-
I'd love to hear more about that.
Dude, I think there was like a verbal flow that was completely different to what you see, because I use AI a lot for work, for just workflows, and when you look at it a lot, you start to recognize patterns over and over again.
I could see that.
But your writing, it looked like you were just thinking and speaking, but in a very structured way.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably because like, your training and what you've done in your background, but how do you write? How do you even like come up with this stuff?
To be really honest with you, I have zero formal training in writing. I started writing in 2013, other than like school writing. I ran the Boston Marathon that had the bombings, and I was at mile 24 when the military stopped us from running the race. I was there for the Boston lockdown as well, when they shut the city down and Black Hawk helicopters everywhere and everything. And Ariana Huffington had posted something online looking for people's experiences from the Boston lockdown. And so I submitted something that was really super short on my way to an interview that I was doing with, I think it was Sky News or something. And it was just around being a Pakistani American Muslim who was a victim and not a suspect in what was going on. And as a way to sort of reaffirm that not all Muslims are bad and let's not point fingers at this time. And the piece for what was, April of 2013 went viral, and they asked that I could come back and be a contributor, and basically just sort of started writing about things for years. 2018 ended up journaling on a daily basis. So I've been also journaling, and I found it to be one of the most therapeutic things. And so still, like, earlier today I woke up, did my journaling, and I think it's been one of the most interesting ways to sort of develop my own voice. Big part of how I do journaling is that in the morning I wake up and I write about the day before, and it's completely freestyle. And the purpose of it is to be able to sort of bring out what are subconscious thoughts that might be there, and instead of like thinking about what I want to write. And so what you're talking about, as you're explaining it, I was like, wait, like this was something I think I've developed based on sort of just doing this, because it's been an interesting way to understand what's on my mind without actually actively knowing what's on my mind. So my writing is usually I just sit down and I have some thoughts and then I just write it. And so it really is just exactly what I'm thinking and just written out.
I love that. I think there's a great quote about this. I think it's Virginia Woolf or someone like that. A great writer said, how can you find your own voice if you fill your brain with everyone else's voices? So I think first thing in the morning, I've read a lot of kind of productivity people and they all phrase it like there's a big overlap between spirituality and productivity, I think, about finding yourself and all that kind of stuff. So first thing in the morning, you don't check your Slack, don't check your Telegram, don't check Twitter. If you're just writing what's in yourself, then I think you're centered for the rest of the day. When did you start doing that?
It was February of 2018 I started, and now have been, over 7 years now I've been doing this. And it's been something where I've always been sort of a productivity hacker, a life hacker for productivity. And so it's interesting you mentioned the like not checking your things. I have a really hard and fast rule that for an hour after I wake up, I do whatever I can not to check my devices. And if I do, like this morning I did, but it was because specifically I was like, I need to message Jin that I'm going to be a little bit late to the coffee shop. But other than that, I won't check Twitter. I won't check Slack. I won't check email. I won't check text messages for at least an hour after waking up. And when I do wake up, I wake up, I pray, I meditate, I journal. And then usually if I'm at home, like I make some tea or something like that for myself that I do as I'm sitting and journaling. And it's sort of a ritual that I've developed over the years. And it's been something that allows me to feel like I am attacking the day as opposed to the day is attacking me.
That's beautiful. I think that there's a element of you're either, what we were talking about earlier about music especially, which I want to get into, but like you can either follow culture and there's a cultural time horizon, right?
Yeah.
Where people are leading it and you don't know which way it's going to go, but you can tell someone who's got authentic voice and doing things. I think authenticity is such an overused word, right?
It is.
In music, in crypto, like there's so many parallels. Like you've got me really going on the parallel. I want you to explain it to the viewers because I think it's amazing. You can see people who are really pushing the boundary. And it's not because they're trying to say what the latest buzzword is, but they're genuinely doing stuff that's interesting to them.
Yeah.
And probably the only way to do that is what you're saying is you've got to like find out what you actually think about stuff rather than just, oh, let me check Kaito and see what everyone else is talking about.
Exactly. Right? Being able to find what you believe, what you think, what you feel, and being able to separate it from what everyone thinks and feels. And then after that is just being comfortable voicing that. I think there are a lot of people who might actually know, but then there's this struggle that you'll internally have with feeling like you need to get some validation for whatever you think may actually be true, and you need the outside world to do it. I've just generally lived a life where I just say what it is I think, and it's been fun and fortunate to see that the pattern recognition that I've done over the years has been one that has sort of indicated that I can be ahead of trends. And then I have learned to trust myself on that as well, right? I think, I don't know if you've read Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, but it was a fascinating book that sort of like points to exactly this, is it really is just about pattern recognition. And so I don't think that you can do that until you learn to trust yourself. And a lot of things for me have been spending time with myself, and things like the journaling, the meditation, the prayer. For me, exercise is also a non-negotiable, but these are things that I've like added into my life that have really helped. And so it's funny, like going back to the writing, hearing you describe it, it's been an intentional practice for many years, which my wife looks at me when I sit down and write, because she's a writer as well. And she doesn't understand where I don't put drafts together. I don't have any outlines of what I want to do. I just know I want to write about something, and I just sit down and I just like quickly write it. I don't do much editing. More recently, I've started using AI to do a little bit of my like editing work. But other than that, I need to just write out the thought exactly as I'm thinking it and just throw it out there.
Yeah, that requires a certain comfortableness with yourself and voice. Because I think the gap between your thinking and your outputs, there's an invisible filter in the middle guided by, I just read a great book by Philip K. Dick, Man in the High Castle. And it talks about how you internalize culture to a point where you don't know exactly that you're doing it. And it takes work to remove that filter and go from thought to output in an authentic, honest way. Going back to culture and pattern matching, I think that one of the most interesting things I found was, my previous life as a doctor and versus my life now, there's a lot of pattern matching there, which is, users are very much like patients.
Yeah.
They don't do what you tell them. They don't act in their own best interests. You have to kind of help them get there. But in the end, if you're trying to look out for their genuine best interests and you communicate that well, then both parties usually get a good result. And that works with healthcare and it works with products. And there's a lot of misinformation on both. So you're kind of competing against that. I guess the question I want to ask you is, you made a really interesting statement earlier today, which you want to dig into, which was crypto is a lot like hip hop.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
So I spent years in the hip hop industry. I mentioned the Huffington Post earlier. It was one day, early 2014, I realized I'm a huge hip hop fan. And, I'm born in 88. And so on the older side for crypto people. But because of that, it was a specific golden age of hip hop that I grew up in. And I realized the HuffPost would let me write about whatever I wanted. And I woke up and said, I'm a huge hip hop fan. I'm just going to start interviewing my favorite hip hop artists because, back in 2014, unless you were Jay-Z, Drake, Lil Wayne, Kanye West, you weren't going to get written about in that publication. So I said, I'm going to reach out to my favorite artists and I'm just sort of going to start interviewing them and start telling their stories. And because this is something I do on the side, it's, I don't have to generate clicks. I also don't have to chase any of the stories that are going to generate those clicks, or I don't have to go after people's breakups or any of those kinds of things. I'm just a huge fan who gets to sit down with people that I've admired growing up and I get to tell their stories. And very quickly got a chance to meet everyone that I was a huge fan of as a kid growing up. And it was always fun to be able to get validation about my music opinions from the people that I also admired growing up. When you sit down with the 50 Cent and 50 Cent tells you that your thoughts on music are completely on point, it's one of those things that if you grew up listening to him, it's just awesome. And, as a lifelong hip hop fan, when I was growing up, hip hop was seen as something that was like noise, right? Like older people would look at it and be like, what's that noise that you're listening to? You should listen to some real music. And what was fascinating about that was to then put it against what every other young person thought, which was like, no, like this is the voice of our generation. And to me, it was, and it started as this intentionally, but just a countercultural, rebellious movement in the face of what was going on at the time, in a way for people to be able to tell their own stories. And for what the youth felt like, this is the inevitability, right? If you look back, the consumerist culture that we have today through music, in many ways, it traces back to hip hop, dating to Run DMC talking about My Adidas. And then you move a little bit further, and even Silicon Valley and like the way that people dress, like it was hip hop artists were the first people actually who, would put on sneakers, but then drive a Rolls Royce. And it was Jay-Z who had said very famously back when the, what was the name of them? One of the champagne brands, the Dom Perignon. I think it was Dom. No, it was Cristal. Cristal. The CEO was unhappy about the idea that rappers and the perception of what rappers, the thuggishness of them, were people that were sort of like bringing about the brand. And Jay-Z sort of basically started this idea of like, oh, we make you guys cool. You don't make us cool. And so we're just going to stop drinking Cristal. And so for me, seeing sort of like these things and then thinking about, I got into crypto in 2012, 2013, just sitting on Twitter, 2011 even. And I started writing about crypto for the HuffPost at the end of 2013 and starting to meet people. It was an event that I went to at the New York City Bitcoin Center with their opening at the end of 2013 and did an article on it. And it was when I met these people who were drunk at a New Year's party and high, basically bidding on Bitcoin for, I think it was at the time, like maybe $600, right?
Yeah.
Using QR codes and Dogecoin. And I felt similar energy where I was just like, wait, like there's something here. And with each passing year, I sort of continued to find what's here seems like an inevitability in the same way. And what this is a countercultural movement of rebellion in similar ways. And then, I mean, even tracing it, further to now, where now we're starting to see the co-opting of the movement by some of these much larger traditional finance players now that they've realized this, in the same way that, I think the Apple top 500 most streamed songs for Apple Music came out last week, maybe. And Drake alone, from what I read, he had like 8.5, 39 out of the top 500 songs were Drake songs. And I think it was Drake as an artist had more streaming relevance than the entire genre of country. And
Wow.
so to think about that as hip hop is not the countercultural movement anymore, it is just mainstream.
Mm.
And I think what we're going to find years from now will be very similar. And we're starting to see the like early stages of it with, Robin Hood and Arbitrum getting together, and BlackRock really being the ones who have led the bull market with setting up their ETFs, or ETPs, technically they're called, with bringing institutional capital in. And so it's definitely a pattern that I've been paying attention to for quite some time now. And I weirdly use it to guide the way that I see the industry is moving.
Yes. There was a great article by Thicky Tot about pattern matching. And the greatest traders in the world are not the ones that have the most information, because at the highest level, a lot of people have the same information. You have, high frequency decks or whatever, but it's about being able to make assessments based on imperfect information, based on other patterns that you see in the world, right? And I think that exactly as you're saying, crypto and hip hop is a great parallel, because counterculture, identity, rebellion against the status quo, anything that people initially say is stupid, generally, is usually a good bet to look into a little bit deeper.
Yep.
Because there's a great quote from, I think it's from Man in the High Castle, which is, anything which has the potential to significantly change the future will have massive amounts of resistance to it. And that won't come in a really obvious way where people are trying to put it down. It'll be dismissive. It'll be disgust or contrarianism. Like way back in 2012 and 2013, like I remember trying to buy it on like local Bitcoin for like £8. Like I couldn't get the banking stuff to work. PayPal wasn't working. And then I couldn't talk about it at work because people were like, what are you like? They put it in the same category as flat earth, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that flat earth is the next big thing. Who knows? But there are these patterns you can find. What do you think about this? Just like hip hop and culture and music has been, there are power laws that occur. For example, like on Uncapped recently, Mark Andreessen was talking about how there are companies that capture all of the funding now, compared to previously venture capital was around lots and lots of bets, whereas now people are tripling down on these things, trying to get decacorns, right?
Yep.
Exactly as you said with Drake.
Yep.
There are these massive concentrations. I think, like you said, the same thing's happening in crypto a little bit. You got Robin Hood and Arbitrum. The value accrual to Arbitrum through the Orbits chain is not massive. And I understand why these big companies are doing this, because they want to control the validators, they want to control everything.
Yep.
Stripe's putting an L1 together, allegedly, right?
Allegedly, yeah.
Where do you think the original roots of crypto are, and how are they relevant in the coming years? Because do you think there's going to be a split towards, privacy, permissionlessness, or is it going to be dominated by the power law, like music almost?
I think the unfortunate reality is more likely power laws. I think if we were to have a really honest conversation about the original intent of Bitcoin, and I think a lot of people might disagree with me here, but Bitcoin came about after we're in the midst of the financial crisis of 2008, right? And this was something that was where the large, big banks that were too big to fail ended up causing a recession, largest modern day recession. And this came about sort of in response to that. And so there's an irony in the fact that this most recent bull run was caused by the same big banks that caused those issues, right? We have the BlackRocks of the world and these large financial institutions getting involved in crypto. And I think if you were intellectually honest about it, then there's an issue there where you can say maybe Bitcoin won, but sovereign money failed, right? Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy own, what is it, somewhere between 2 and 3% of all of Bitcoin.
Yes.
And we're starting to see way more of these new Bitcoin buying entities pop up. And so if we're going to consolidate and use power laws and be able to have certain people own all of it, then did Bitcoin as the experiment that it was supposed to start as actually succeed? I don't think so. Now, where I sit on that is that I'm not making a moral judgment about that. I'm just looking at it by sitting back and going, this isn't what we originally said it would, but people are happy with number go up. As long as number go up, we can be intellectually dishonest about it. I just sit in the place of, this is what's going on, and that's okay. I'm completely fine with that. This is just sort of objectively what's happening, though. And if you want to look at it from that perspective, then sort of what are the inevitable logic trees as to where this leads? And how do you go about being able to continue to pattern match and recognize where things are headed so that you can build and work in a way towards where it looks like it's going? But it requires an intellectual honesty about where we are. And I don't think whether it's that people don't want to admit that to themselves or that people don't see it. But to myself, I think, the divergence has already happened.
Yes, I agree. Going back to what you said about interviewing people, like it's the same thing with media, right? Like I do this because I love it. I get to meet interesting people that I'm a fan of, that I see and have interesting conversations, but you're not forced to chase clicks. You can kind of say what you want to say.
Yeah.
Which is great. But going back to this, some people would say a corruption, other people would say a change of crypto, the original things. There's a direct through line between this and music, the hip hop analogy. And then before music was religion, right?
Yeah.
And then the realness, is this the true gospel of this thing? There is a direct through line between crypto, music, and religion. And this idea of, was this what originally Satoshi / the prophet wanted? Or is this something, and religion's been corrupted in many ways, music's changed in many ways, and that's a moral judgment. But the pragmatism and intellectual honesty is a separate thing that we can do as individuals to say, maybe it's not where we want it to be, but look, we've both got not the usual backgrounds, right? And, I remember vividly growing up in Sri Lanka, we left Sri Lanka because of the civil war.
Yeah.
And there were capital controls. And I remember pretty vividly mum and dad being like, what can we take? Like we've got to take jewelry because we can't take the stuff we need to get to the UK because the government won't let us take it out of the banks. And I think that where crypto has succeeded is, I think the stablecoin side of things, remittances, in the emerging world, it's done amazing things. Because even in Sri Lanka right now, and a lot of places around the world, like Turkey and Argentina, there's a lot of debate about
the hyperinflation.
Hyperinflation. Is it even working? There's people saying, are people using stablecoins? Are they not? But just the fact there's the option there, I think is amazing. So in that sense, I think it's succeeded.
So to take that a little further though, right? Because I agree with you. To me, stablecoin adoption has been one of the inevitabilities of this industry. But then you also have to ask yourself about how it furthers the US's hegemony.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And then if you want to take that a little bit further and we want to take the analogy of altcoins or what you might call shit coins and turn them into, if everything becomes digitalized, then is the Turkish lira a shit coin? And if you have everyone selling the Turkish lira or the naira or whichever currency that you want to pick outside of the US dollar, the euro, the pound, then aren't we only furthering colonialism? And it's a question you have to ask yourself, and it's very abstract to have to do.
Definitely.
But then if right now we see altcoins as, there's Cardano and there's Solana and there's, Ripple and all these things, but then the inevitability of crypto becoming the actual global financial system and every currency except for a few becoming altcoins, then aren't we also getting towards a point where there's only going to be 4 or 5 currencies as a whole in the entire world? And then how do you then start to operate on that potential assumption? Are some of the kinds of things that taking this, how do you take that logic tree, take it a few steps further, and then think about a world in which that's a possibility? And how do you plan for that possibility? How do you hedge against that? What are the things that you're supposed to do? So those are like the things where like my brain goes down these like deep places to sit down and think about.
For sure. In principle, like I like the way you think in first principles and then natural progression of those in steps, right? Throughout history, pattern matching.
Yeah.
If you look at anything in history, any time barriers between markets are removed, which is kind of what crypto is doing.
Yeah.
You have, as we said before, power law models of growth, but then you also get pushing out of existing local things. So I think you're absolutely right. Globalization as a thing naturally pushes out the local priorities because you have global priorities, and there's market inefficiencies that mean that, for example, when the East India Company from the UK was doing stuff all the way through India and the colonies, you know, these markets opening had massive consequences, both good and bad for a lot of these places. I mean, mainly bad for like the locals as a Sri Lankan person, but like, look, I'm not going to be dishonest and say it's very easy for like, and this, I don't want to get too political, but, you know, like a lot of the schooling system in Sri Lanka was now incredible. Literacy rate is 99% because of the British system, right? Railways are amazing. The administration's amazing. But then on the other hand, there's a huge amount of suffering. So, you know, I think all societal changes have these massive things that happen. You can't control it.
Not at all.
But I want to go back to kind of more to your background. I want to talk a little because you got a very interesting background. Tell me where you grew up and what were you doing before this?
I grew up in Jersey City, New Jersey. Grew up in I wouldn't call it a ghetto neighborhood, but it definitely was not, or maybe it was, right? Went to Catholic school growing up because the schools that were public in the area were ones where kids would get stabbed and computers would get thrown out windows. And so my parents made the judgment call that even though, you know, child of Pakistani Muslim immigrants, that it still made sense for me from the time I was in pre-K to go to a Catholic school, and grew up in the, you know, 90s, like late 80s baby, 90s and 2000s. We moved to Long Island in the early 2000s when I was starting high school. And it was an interesting time growing up, like, you know, because I think I'm one of the last few people who lived without how internet works today. You know, like we had dial-up internet with AOL CDs that would come in. And so remembering life sort of before the way being online works now and smartphones, you know, I remember the Sidekicks and then the Blackberries and like everything like
Palm OS.
Yeah, Palm OS, like progressively becoming more smartphone native. And then I remember when the original iPhones came out, and then, you know, now we're on 16. I think 17 comes out later this year. So it's generally just been an interesting time to grow up. When I look at, I sort of feel like I'm, one of the last generation of like being able to know life before and after.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Because everyone talks about the singularity, right? About the AI side, but I think we've already had a singularity of ubiquitous internet. There's a before and after. And again, like, I don't want to keep going back to religion, but like there's BC and AD, right? And then I don't know what the internet version of that is. And then mobile phone adoption.
Mobile phone adoption has been one of the most fascinating things. So yeah, I mean, you know, grew up in a family of, you know, parents were immigrants. They achieved what you would call the American dream. My father moved here with nothing. And, you know, he worked at convenience stores. He was a cab driver in New York. He was a manager at Dunkin' Donuts. When I was born, he was working at Popeyes, the fried chicken place. And now we have a nice house in Long Island. My siblings and I all got elite educations. So in many ways, what you would say was what people idolized as the American dream, was what sort of my family achieved. And it's always been interesting, even growing up, knowing that close to 50% of Fortune 500 companies were started by immigrants or the children of immigrants. My father was an entrepreneur. My mother worked in physical therapy. And so having the entrepreneurial spirit from the time I was a young kid, you know, I was one of those like very stereotypical, like I think it was like in third grade, I started like selling candy and basketball cards, right?
Yeah, dude. Me too.
Like, exactly. There you go, right? It's
There's
like,
a Venn diagram, dude. Let me tell you a quick story. So there was a trend in the UK in like It was in early secondary school. These new sweets came out.
Okay.
It was amazing. And they had like a little kind of elastic ring, but they had little like polos, like mini polos around them. And what you could do is you put the thing around your neck. It was big enough to go around your neck if you're a kid.
Okay.
And then you'd pull two sides out. You hold the polo between your teeth and you bite down. It pings out like a slingshot. So this was my first experience, I suppose, arms dealing because because not only were the sweets delicious, there were groups in schools that were like, we were having wars in recess or break, right? Because we were just from different primary schools, a lot of tribalism, like, we're different primaries, we're in secondary, new territory. I mean, I guess this tells you the kind of school I went to.
Yeah.
But then there was a demand for these sweets. And I was like, the shops nearby, they're kind of expensive. I'm going to go find a wholesaler. So I went to a couple of the shops. They wouldn't tell me where they get it from. One of them did. I'd been going there for a couple of years to buy like stuff for my mum and dad.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a big deal. And they were like, yeah, we got these guys. So I like went to a payphone because I didn't want to use my home phone because my parents would find out. I was like, how much can I buy it in one go? Can you give me a discount?
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, we'll give you like 100 boxes for this much. So got a few buddies. I guess this is venture capital, right?
Yeah.
And then we bought these in bulk and we started to sell them in school. And the reason the whole thing got shut down was because one of the teachers got hit in the ear by one of these things. And then the thing got stuck in his, nothing happened.
Yeah.
He was fine.
But still.
But there was a proliferation of these
Casualty
sweets.
of war.
There was casualties, you're right. And I think that there's such a Venn diagram of like hip hop, music, sneakers, Pokemon cards, basketball cards.
5th grade was where Pokemon cards, when I was in 5th grade, is when Pokemon cards started happening. And so for me, thinking back to sneakers and all of that, I started hustling as a kid because I wanted Jordans. I remember the Jordan 12s came out, I think it was when I was in 3rd grade, which was around the same time the first Space Jam movie came out, right? And so it was like, and when I was younger, like my parents couldn't afford to buy me these things, And so I remember from a very young age understanding that financial freedom was my way out in ways.
Yeah.
And so for me was, instead of that candy, was I did Starburst. So I went to a school where lunch was $2. People would get back a quarter. And so I figured out that I would go buy boxes of Starburst and I would go and I would sell them, and it was 10 cents each, 3 for a quarter. So I would take my entire lunch period and I would go to every single person in the cafeteria selling them Starburst.
Change.
Because they all had the change. And
Amazing.
And so I was like, everyone's just going to give me the full quarter. No one's going to do 10 cents each. They're just going to take 3 of them. And I would sell the pink ones at a premium because everyone wanted the pink ones, right? So it was like understanding that from a really young age, and then, coming home and having like tons and tons of quarters and starting to be able to earn a little bit of money and then buying myself sneakers.
Yeah.
And in 5th grade was when Pokemon cards came out and Digimon cards and like, it was like, Yu-Gi-Oh! Like it was just like all of those things, but it traced back to like, I wanted to get fly. I wanted sneakers. I wanted hats. It was back when like Sean John and Rockaware were popular brands, and like my parents couldn't afford that. And I didn't want to put that on them either. And so, I'm 10, 11, 12 years old and figuring this stuff out. Like I actually got my first job the summer after 5th grade.
Wow. What were you doing?
I worked at a fried chicken place. My dad's friend owned it in New York City. My dad would drop me off at the train station in Jersey City. I would take the train into Manhattan, and then I would go walk and I'd work at a Kennedy fried chicken place on every single day, 5 days a week. And I would get paid $20 a day. And it was to try to keep me out of trouble. I remember years later asking my dad, like, I was like 10 at the time. Like, you used to follow me into the city, right? And he was like, no. Like, no. And so it was like also the extreme independence that you end up developing from doing things like that. And so from a young age, going about sort of being like, oh, I'm going to go and do these things. Like when Pokemon cards were huge, I used to go into the city and go to Chinatown and pick up Pokemon cards. And I shouldn't say this, but like I'd sell the cards to like the stores, like the Charizards and things like that. And so those were all, but it's like I found like just the young hustlers
Yeah.
They all sort of picked up these same exact things from
Same
the time they were
patterns.
kids. Always it's like selling candy as a kid. You
Yeah.
know, it's just like a stereotypical thing.
Yeah. Because you're recognizing markets, you're recognizing demand.
Yeah.
But also, I think that's like the pull factor, right? And the
Yeah.
information side. But for me, it was always the gap between when I asked first generation immigrants, my mum and dad, who had like no money,
Mhm.
to be like, hey, can we spend 20% of your weekly budget on a couple of packs of these cards with pictures on?
Yeah.
And their confusion and like, what are you talking about? But also the pain of being like, I can't give this to you. And that makes me feel bad, which meant I stopped asking for stuff. I was like, well, I guess I got to do it now. Like,
Yep.
I don't want to make him feel bad
Yep.
for all this kind of stuff, because it's not about collecting the stuff. It's about expressing yourself,
Mhm.
right? I think there's a bit of that with crypto. Like, we talk a lot about fashion earlier.
Yeah.
Where do you think the parallels are between fashion and crypto today, even just financial markets today?
Oh man, I think that for the most part, no one has any fashion sense in our industry. I think you like, it's like very clear to see that there are a lot of people who won't be here years from now because they don't have that sense for like what's cool, what's now, what's anything. People are not, for the most part, long-term thinkers. They're max extractive, and they don't generally develop their own style. They develop their style based on what they're told. And so for me, looking around, what's interesting is I don't think most of the people that work here now will be in our industry in 5 to 10 years, because I don't think people realize where it's headed or what's going on. And it comes down to like not knowing those like signals. But yes, fashion just as a whole, stepping back, it is horrendous in this industry. No one knows how to dress. It is something that bothers the hell out of me, you know?
What do you think the root cause of that is?
I think that a lot of people are in the industry for the wrong reasons.
And what do you think those reasons are?
I think that people see it as a quick way to make easy money. And that's for the most part it is. And I think maybe before it was like that. I think things have gotten much more sophisticated in this industry in a way where if you're trying to make easy money, then you have to be scamming for the most part. You know, before it really was like anything you bought in DeFi summer or NFT time, it was like if you were able to get on a mint, you were making a ton of money, right? I do think that those were just fads of unregulated gambling. We saw the same thing sort of happen with meme coins in 2024. But yeah, I don't think for the most part people are long-term thinking about the industry. I think that might be a better way to frame it, is that people think that like these sort of short-term trends make them some sort of savants if they end up getting lucky and catching a trend. And the reality is that they would do just as well having a monkey throw darts at a board telling them what to invest in during those bull market periods that happen. Like,
It's true.
People will be like, I'm a genius meme coin investor. And it's like, no, like any meme coin you put money into for the most part at a certain point, if you're sitting online enough, will like do well. But like being able to actually understand what's going on and then see how that translates to like what the future of this industry, which is just, we will just be the rails of fintech 2.0. That is it. Like, I think it's like a very boring outcome that's coming is just going to be fintech 2.0. That's it.
I think I agree with you on some of that, but I disagree on some. I think the definition for scam is based on, I sound like the Argentina guy now, but I think it's based on frame reference.
Okay.
Time, value, and expected outcomes. On a very short term, I agree, because the definition of a rug is actually really up for debate in a lot of kind of crypto circles. People defend various things, and I'm not here to judge, but you know, someone starts a project and they leave it completely, they rug the chart.
Yeah.
Obviously, on the spectrum, that is a definite scam and a rug, right?
Yeah.
On the other end of the spectrum, what happens when you get, you know, in TradFi, multiple funding rounds in bad faith, you get inflated valuations, everyone's, you know, WeWork, Theranos, all of these things are objectively TradFi scams. But, you know, if you got in the middle and you got out in the middle, was it a scam to you? Then probably not. You got what you want out of it. I think the same thing happens with the stock market, right? You have all
Mhm.
of these things that are not generating a huge amount of value for investors, but the people are trying hard inside it. And I
Yeah,
think that there are shades of gray with this in the sense that,
for sure. For sure.
but I agree with you on the whole.
I
There
think,
is an insincerity about, oh, this is the new biggest thing in the world, and therefore you should buy it, and I'm going to sell on secondaries. And that's like not okay.
yeah, I think when I look at a lot of it, I look for and have always looked for some sort of intrinsic potential value.
Mm,
And so when I looked at having been part of this industry dating back to, 2013, 2014, and sort of seeing everything happen, it's always the same thing in sort of just like a different twist, right? The
yes.
NFT boom of when, there were certain JPEGs going for 7 figures and now you couldn't get $10,000 for them.
Mm,
It was just basically unregulated gambling. And
mm,
I, again, like dating back to what I was saying earlier, like I don't have any like moral things against gambling. I
mm,
just think that like in traditional markets, asymmetric information
mm,
is considered insider information. And because things are unregulated, we can't necessarily call it insider trading. It's just having asymmetric access to information if you're part of the LA vape cabal.
mm,
And people who want to partake in these markets with their own money are more than welcome to. But, we speak on the Millet coin or we speak on the Trump coin. And then you go look at, Dex Screener, Etherscan, and it's very easy to see that there were insiders
mm,
who knew exactly what was going on and when things were launching and how they could make money. I think I remember seeing one of the wallets that bought Trump coin within 10 seconds of launch, bought $1 million worth, and then within the week had sold it on Robinhood the following week for like $300 million. And so to me, that's sort of what I'm more so when I look and I'm like, we know what's going on, but people are able to like decide what they want to do with their
mm,
own money. And so, I use scam a little bit loosely, but to me, I think about things more so the way Charlie Munger would in terms of value investing.
mm,
And so I don't actually own a lot of kinds of tokens. And even though I've seen a lot of these things happen in the industry over the years, I've never actually been one to partake. Like the meme coin mania, I didn't,
mm,
even though I saw the patterns for what would potentially in the short term earn me quite a good bit of money. And then in the same thing in 2021 during NFTs, I also didn't, even though I understood and knew what was going on. I knew where people were going for asymmetric access to information.
mm.
I've never been in the 0.1% of having that asymmetric access. It's been a while I've been in the 1%, and it's just not where I've put my energies.
Yes. And this comes back to what we were talking about, validation, right? Because I think a lot of this, what you're talking about, I'm a savant, I know this, I know that,
Yeah.
is about how can I feel special about something I may or may not have done well at, maybe by pure luck.
Yeah.
Because the NFT era, the AI agent era, like there are all these attempts at validation of, I know everything about this thing, so therefore I'm special. And I think sitting back and being able to be like, I get what's going on. Like there is a strategy here, but I'm not going to get confused with the reality is important.
Yeah. In general, and maybe it's actually, years from now, I look back and go, oh man, I really should have done those things. For the most part, though, I've looked at it as what's going on is short term value extraction
Yes.
from a small number of people and towards a larger group who
Yes.
are your, just like who you sell your bags on. I actually, it was a couple months back, I got reached out to by a podcast from Slate. So like big PR company. And they had seen an article that I had done, a few articles I'd done on meme coins. So for CoinDesk, I wrote an article about meme coins aren't easy money.
Mm,
And I sort of explained the insider processes that go on.
mm,
From the outside, people will think, oh, if you launch a meme coin, you can just make a lot of money. And I was like, no, like to go about,
industrial.
it is industrial, right? And I learned a lot of this because I saw the inside understandings of what went on with like the Hawk Tuah coin. Because I wrote an article about that as well. It was a Haley Welch.
Mm.
And, chatted with the teams involved and like what many would argue was a rug there.
Mm.
And going back to what you're saying, like I know for a fact it wasn't an intentional rug.
Mm.
It was a lot of mishaps that happened that made it look like one. So I agree, like the scam word is a strong word to use because I don't believe Haley's team did a scam. It came off that way. But when you looked at sort of the optics of it, it felt like one. And so Slate reached out to me because I'd done this. I got quoted in Wired magazine a few times around meme coins as well. Been pretty vocal against meme coins in that way, where I'm like, there's nothing moral against them, but the reality of what's going on is pretty apparent. And we've seen that now where meme coin markets are down to nothing, where if you had just like literally taken all of that money and just like put it into Bitcoin, like you would do way better, over time, right?
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, man, it's something where to me, like how these markets work, it's just maybe I look back and go, I should have done it, but
I doubt it.
Yeah, like I did this article for Slate, I was saying, or podcast, and I explained how meme coins work to them on the podcast, and the idea was that they wanted to launch a meme coin on Solana.
Slate did.
Slate did. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. It was called Brain Worm. After it was like a play on like RFK having a brain worm or talking about it, and so they launched this and like
they did.
Yeah.
They
so
did it.
So the idea was like they reached out to me and they were like, we saw your articles on Wired, we saw your articles on CoinDesk. We'd love to understand how this works, and so we did an entire episode. And then they sort of were like, I walked them through everything on how things actually work at industrial scale. And then they launched it and they saw nothing, $2,000 market cap kind of thing. And when the podcast came out, I was like, guys, like I'm going to tweet about this, right? I'm going to talk about the thing. I knew what was going to happen. It ended up hitting a multi-million-dollar market cap after I tweeted about it. And I didn't think it was going to happen to that degree, but I knew what was going to happen because it was sort of like, what was it, unicorn fart dust or whatever, where they launched it because they thought meme coins were a joke and they thought nothing would come of it. And the irony of that is that you take that one to the moon, right?
Exactly.
And
the 4chan mentality.
Exactly. And had they launched that 6 or 8 months prior, it would have gone way higher than a few $1 million.
For sure.
But as soon as I tweeted about it and it did well, all of a sudden the team started messaging me, Azeem, like,
what do we do?
What's going on? Like, and they started freaking out because this is hitting a multi-million-dollar market cap. And I knew that this was going to happen.
And they're legally exposed as a regulated company, launching an official meme coin.
Yeah. And so when this happened, I'm texting them being like, guys, don't worry. We should do a follow-up soon, by the way. And they were like, yes, please, let's do a follow-up. But like, I've seen this and I had people send it to me for free, ask me to sell it to make some money on it. It's still sitting in my wallet. I could have purchased it prior to tweeting about it.
Yeah.
But again, like I have chosen intentionally not to play these games.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because if we go to the kind of do the logical steps, right? It's very easy for us to say this because people sitting at home might be like, look at these two douchebags doing an interview. They've got the time, they're traveling, they're doing this. Meanwhile, I'm working a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 7.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
And this is my only way of having a little bit of hope.
Yeah.
And I think that comes from like a wider cultural shift of nihilism.
Financial nihilism is a real thing. I think just in general, the idea that everyone thinks that they are going to succeed through winning the lottery is a scary thing to me. It speaks more broadly to how bad things are.
Yes.
Right.
The social mobility is at all-time low.
Yep.
And the casino owners want you to believe they're on your side.
Yeah. They want you to believe that you can win it. I think the other thing that's always been scary to me is that the person who's able to turn $1,000 into $10 million and then round trips, the interesting thing is that had they not believed they could turn 1,000 into 1 million or 10 million, they would have never gotten there. But then the same principles that took them to 10 million are not the ones that will allow them to stay there.
Exactly.
And so I think, I've seen this in fame and I see it in money. Getting it is easier than keeping it. And so to me, despite being someone who is not wealthy, it's very important to me to create fundamental ways in which I go about, or values that I go about using to live, because if and when I get to that place, I actually want to have the practices to keep it. Because, we saw the NFT influencers of 2021 who are still stuck in 2021 if you go to their Twitters, because they round tripped 8 figures. And And it was only because of the same principles that got them there that brought them back.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of it to me, is that there's a way to go about doing it that, again, years from now, I may look back and be like, I really should have been taking part in doing these things because I'm way better off had I done them. Only time will tell, though.
But that's like poker, right? All the best traders are good poker players. You rarely find a good strategist that's a bad poker player. And I think there's two principles here, which is you should never think what were the hands that could have come up.
Yeah.
Because regret is pointless.
Yes.
You make the decisions you can.
Yes.
But I also think that, integrity and reputation, very hard to build quickly and very easy to lose quickly.
Very easy to lose quickly. Very, very easy to lose quickly. And this is an industry where people don't think long-term enough, in my eyes. And I think it's because I've been in it so long already. To me, it's not worth taking the gambles with my reputation and with my integrity that would allow me to cash out on a more short-term basis, but then inhibit me on a long-term basis, because this industry is still tiny.
It is.
It is tiny.
There's like 20K of us on Twitter, right?
That's it, right? And everyone knows everyone. And the reality of how things work is behind closed doors.
Absolutely.
Right? And so to me, I've always been someone who believes, shout out to the people who protect my name when I'm not in the room. And I want to continue to live in a way that will allow people to continue doing that for me.
And that comes through actions rather than what you tell them to say.
Yeah, totally.
Because you're totally right. I think everyone who maybe is not in the industry or is early, like I'm in a lot of marketing chats, right, on Telegram. And it's all about, what is the perfect series of words that we can do to like drive engagement? Or, there's a big thing about storytelling and law building. Obviously, all these things have a part to play. But, from a foundational perspective, crypto is about power, alliances, and incentives.
Yep.
Those three things.
Yep.
And that's it.
Totally.
Throughout history, throughout war, like crypto is war.
Yeah.
It is finance, it is power, it is cabals. There are tribalisms that are geographically related, There's like the Russian component, there's the Americans, there's the Indians, the Chinese, the Koreans and the Japanese. Like this is, I think the way to succeed in crypto for anyone at home, I think, is understand history, understand power, and then the models will carry over. Because if you're worried about like what's the latest word salad, then you're never going to get anywhere.
You're always behind if you're worried about the latest word salad. And It's been one of the things that it goes to assess long-term and short-term value creation and like what you're looking to do there. But I agree with you. I find so much of crypto and people in this industry feel like they are inventing something instead of reinventing. And I'm always looking for, it's why like the analogy of music is able to help drive it. I'm always looking for ways.
Your root, right?
Yeah. And like, how do you find what are the parallel routes that you can use to be able to sort of understand in which way things will flow and go and move, so that you can use that as a grounding anchor? Because I find that most people, their word salads, they really think that they invented something new, and they typically haven't.
Yes, absolutely. I want to go back to what you said about fame.
Yeah.
So tell me about the stories and experiences you have with, because I guess to preface that is, there's a lot of people at home that are probably watching this and being like, well, it's okay for these guys. I only have a year to make it. Right?
Yeah.
And that time pressure drives you to make bad decisions.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of parallels there with fame, but also like, the AI boom. I feel all the time when I'm on X that I should be doing more. I should be like working harder. I should be doing this. And I think that comparison element is kind of what happens in the music industry and fame and even comedy industry, where you see everyone else doing better. You're rushing, you make sacrifices to get it. And then when you get it, like, what do you do? Like, tell me the stories, man. Like you've been in the game a long time.
I'd mentioned earlier, I started interviewing hip hop artists for fun. And for me, it was always more about getting a chance to, on some sort of personal level, be involved in the industry more than it was to use it as a way that I would turn it into like my daily work. And so, interviews, I did Big Sean, Bun B, Talib Kweli, T.I., Jermaine Dupri, DJ Drama, many people in Jay-Z's organization. And that turned into having a small web and mobile development shop in 2016 and 2017. And we ended up doing stuff for Kanye West, Tiana Taylor, Bryson Tiller, Ray Schremer, Dreamville Records. And it's funny because even then, the sexy stuff was always meant to be marketing to bring in the more boring things. And the boring things would be what would pay the bills, and the sexy things would be the marketing. And in the time that I was doing that writing, because I wasn't looking to use it as the way that I earned income necessarily, I got a chance to just become friends with people. So like singers, songwriters, producers, label people, agents, managers, like everyone in the industry. And I got to just know people, the publicists, understand how people went about building their brands out. Even, we're looking at building out the Miden brand. And I think about being a mixtape rapper and, putting out sounds. I think of like analogies to like putting out a sound on like a song on SoundCloud and, getting to the point where you then put out a mixtape and then you generate buzz with the mixtape and you get signed to a record label because you have a hit song. And then the pressures that come with being able to then put out your first album. And if your first album does well, the pressure that you then put on yourself for a second album and a third album. And what does it mean to go on tour? And I think about a lot of that kind of stuff because I had a chance to sit down with all these people behind the scenes and understand sort of what's it like when you go from having nothing to 20,000 people at Madison Square Garden cheering your name. What's it like when you go from working at, a Popeye's Pizza to not being able to step outside anymore? I saw, it's random, but I saw a video the other day of Cristiano Ronaldo talking about how he didn't go to the funeral of one of his former teammates. And the reason he didn't was he dated it back to 2005, he said, when his father passed. And when he went to the funeral, how much extra pain and grieving that it caused his family because of how it turned into a show of Cristiano Ronaldo and how his family wasn't able to properly grieve because it became like this thing because he's a celebrity.
What a curse.
Right? And so he was saying in this interview, people may think that, I have less love for this person because I didn't go to their funeral, but I actually didn't go. And since my father's funeral, I haven't gone to a single funeral. And it's because I don't want it to become about me. And I didn't want to take away from the grieving that's going on with this family. So I used to ask questions like this, Funny enough, Cristiano Ronaldo, I did meet once in Las Vegas, and he was in Real Madrid at the time. And I don't think he was supposed to be there. So I like sprinted over and I really want to get a pic. And his brother just like waved me off. It was like the one celebrity. I've met so many people that I was so excited to meet. And it was fascinating because no one in the casino knew who he was. He was walking around with 2 people only.
Wow.
No security. It was his brother and like what looked like a friend, no massive bodyguards. But yeah, it's just, going back to like having seen like how fame has like operated and worked in a lot of these people's lives and how it affected things. And I use it when I look at what's going on in crypto because I see a lot of people who, particularly on crypto Twitter, it's like very evident that they've never experienced those levels of validation in their lives.
Or they're not ready for it.
And they're not ready for it. And when they get it, they don't realize that the validation isn't supposed to be the end in itself. It's the thing that you're supposed to use from a business perspective to drive things. One of the interesting things I learned in the industry in music was how you sort of develop a character or a persona that steps outside when you go on stage, but that persona is not who you actually are. And being able to keep the 2 personas separated is what allows you to best maintain your mental health in the long term. Because once you start mixing the stage persona with the personal person that you actually are, things start to go wrong. But if you recognize that, because no one's really meant to get on stage and have 20 or 100,000 people screaming their names. Like I don't think humans were like literally built for that. And then everything that comes with fame and that validation and that money and that power and everything. But it's how well you're in a position to be able to separate those personas and then live in this dichotomous way. And I see it in small ways within crypto because there's all of these people who get on crypto Twitter or they go to these conferences and they've never been the kind of people who, were the ones who had massive fans. They're not, people in crypto weren't generally the jocks even. Like they weren't popular in high school. They weren't the football players or anything. And so I like continue to operate using sort of that where even for myself, there's a persona that I use on the outside and then who I am and how I am personally with my actual friends and family or in one-on-one conversations. That is not the person that like goes out on stage. That is not the person that speaks on a crypto Twitter or any of these platforms. And not to say I am Beyonce by any means, right? But it's just to say that I think the same principles are there. And it's where I've seen so many of the crash outs that happen because
heavy crash outs,
right? Like you see
public.
Yeah, very public, heavy crash outs.
And it's usually around ego.
Yeah.
It's like,
and it's
they've wronged me.
Yeah.
They've done something. They said this. Here's some screenshots of DMs. And it's like, dude, what are you doing?
And it's because people forget that they are not that character. And
yes.
And even the thing about fame that's always been so interesting to me is that, unless you're Drake, who's been running things for 16 years, most people, even at the height of their careers, get a short period of time where they are like the biggest it thing.
Yes.
And then that goes away.
Yeah.
And you see in the music and the movies industry, a lot of people who are unable to deal with that because they get accustomed to having all of that attention. And when they're not the it thing anymore, how they sort of spiral out of control. And so I've seen in very analogous and parallel ways, just in much smaller ways, how that occurs with people when, you are the it project before mainnet, right? You are everything. Everyone cares about you. Everyone loves you.
Everyone wants to get to
Everyone wants to get to you. How much and you start to internalize those things of that level of importance, self-importance. And then the inevitability of they only bring you up to take you down. I mean, we saw what happened with Drake last year, where he ran the game for so long and how excited people were.
They loved it.
Everyone loved being able to bring him down and feel like they were humbling him. And we've seen it with projects. I'm a big fan of Smokey and Barachain. I'm a big fan of Luca and Abstract. And the amount that people built them up only to post mainnet start tearing them down. And so those are things that like I take with me and how I go about building out what we're doing. And even if there are more likes at times or more people reaching out, always reminding myself like, hey, do not get caught in that bubble that you have seen, not just within our industry, but also in much larger ways outside in the entertainment industry.
Definitely. This, again, I think there's such a through line about your thought process going all the way back to kind of religion and thought processes, because, we were talking about Marcus Aurelius earlier. There's loads of things in there in meditations around do not listen to the yapping of others. And he actually used the word yapping, which is kind of funny, right? And there's a story that I won't say who it was, but conference like way, way back in 2021, right? And it actually might have been 2022. So like things were on the down, especially the NFT cycle. And I remember an interaction where people were being introduced, and there was like a wide variety of people. There's like finance, there's NFT stuff, like it's just a normal event. And there was like a particular NFT influencer that was like, hey, and they used their like X name, right? And the person was like from finance. I didn't know who they were.
Yeah.
And then I think there was like a combination of really interesting factors that I saw playing out, right? The downswing of the NFT market, so bags were fully down, all of that kind of stuff, not being recognized, not being relevant, and then also sycophants nearby.
Yeah.
So like the entourage that was like, oh, you don't know who so-and-so is? The hell is wrong with you? And then like walking off. And I was like, what a weird interaction. Why not just be like, oh, like I do this. What do you do? And I think that internalization of status is dangerous because it messes you up.
It's super dangerous.
And you push away all the people that love you.
Yes.
To because they don't match that pattern, right?
And it's been something I've seen the parallels of, and you see it with, I think it's most easy to see it with KOLs, right? But big traders, founders, you see those crash outs that occur because they internalize that adulation and that importance. And then when it doesn't last, they don't know how to handle it. And it's why, to me, what's way more important than being the meta of the moment, because there's a new meta every few months, is how do you build in a way that is future proofing? How can you be okay with slow and steady, consistent gains over time that allow you to have a multi-year upwards trajectory without necessarily being the person who has the massive hockey stick growth at any one particular moment, particularly when you do it in a way that's artificially manufactured? Because I think that's the other thing about it, is similar to the machine being turned on in the music industry for certain artists or entertainers. There is a very you turn it on. Certain publicists, certain record labels, they're able to make you famous. Fame is created. Fame is not necessarily something that just happens. And if you're in our industry, we also know how to do that. There are ways that you can create overnight success, but you can't necessarily ever maintain that success. And so even if you are to do it, understanding that it's a switch that you turn on by paying certain people, usually, because it's fully artificial. How do you get all of the KOLs talking about you? You pay them, right? Or you give them tokens at a low valuation. How do you get covered in a lot of the outlets? It's fully pay to play. How do you speak at the conferences that you want to? It's pay to play. And so much of what people sit back and they go, oh, if I could only be a founder like X, not knowing how it's been artificially constructed. And so, we'll see how sort of the way that I'm operating using these parallels plays out. But for me, over the last few years, if anything, I've only seen that I need to continue to maintain the way that I see myself going about doing it to help protect myself from what I see happen to so many others.
You got to zag when everyone else zigs, right?
Yeah.
I guess if crypto was a record label, its catalog would be only one-hit wonders.
Yeah,
right.
That's such a great way to put it. And I think the scary thing about one-hit wonders, and it was something that I saw in the industry. I don't know if you know the artist Designer. He had the Panda song, right?
A great song.
Yeah. Right. So I was working with Kanye's team at the time when that came out, and when they ended up signing him. And the scary thing about someone like a Designer, who last I heard was publicly exposing himself on a plane and has
it's sad.
Exactly, and has gone about not really doing anything since, is being a one-hit wonder is a lot like winning the lottery, where you create massive success for yourself without actually knowing how and why you did it. And so if you haven't had to be someone who put the hours in and developed habits that, maybe Eminem is an artist who talks about he goes to the studio like a 9-to-5 job. He goes to the studio, he writes all day, he records, he has his processes. You're not getting Eminem in the studio at midnight. He won't come, right? If you don't meet the timelines of him being his 9-to-5, he's just leaving. Eminem has been someone who for years built those processes, created success, understands that. But if you're someone like a Designer who you put out a song, you didn't really you just made something that just worked. What do you do when you get back in the studio to recreate that success? How do you recreate the success that you don't know what you did to get in the first place? Same thing like a lottery. You just put it in, you get a jackpot. Oh, I'm a genius. Well, okay, cool. Now, the real genius is, can you create that again and again and again and again, right? And so that's what I think is so scary about our industry, is you can do one-hit wonders, and people have become so attuned to one-hit wonders is the way to go about doing things that they don't even put in the practice or understanding of what does it mean, and how do you go about building something that's not a one-hit wonder? How do you become a generational artist?
And that's really interesting because people are more aware of this system. People are more aware of the fact that a lot of teams and a lot of coins are packaged up essentially long-term, what we would consider a rug, right?
Yeah.
And whether that's because the market wants them or not, or how the tokenomics is set up, then it's a different matter. But going back to the music, so who would you say is the Eminem of crypto?
I don't think we've gotten to the place where we can actually call that, because right now we're still in that phase where we're starting to develop who are going to be sort of like the mainstays. I think if I were to try to make an analogy, it would be like we're in the early 2000s of hip hop. And, you know, I don't think in the early 2000s it was really understood. There were people who felt that they would become that, but, you know, we didn't really know who would. And I wouldn't say that we're even at a place where, you know, sure, let's say Bitcoin has established itself. That's not to say Bitcoin can't fail anymore. And Ethereum has established itself. Doesn't say Ethereum can't fail. There are things that indicate that there are some people who are here to stay. But I think the next 5 years to 10 years is what's really going to help us understand, will Base be who's the one that's around and wins the consumer layer? Did the Solana meme coins put them in a position where they can then use that to jump off into something else? Will Arbitrum be the one who continues to get the biggest deals? You know, all three of the teams mention brilliant people who are part of everything, right? Like, you know, Steven over at Off-Chain Labs, I'm a big fan of him. Like Jesse over at Base, I remember when Base was still just talking about launching in pre-testnet phases and had been chatting with their team. But like I've been watching sort of how everyone's gone about doing things, but I don't think I would be able to sort of say, these are the ones that have already developed a way where they'll be around. Like, and I think it also will really depend on, because there are so many people who've been able to earn so much money, like, where do you keep your hunger? And how do you keep your hunger? Because the idea of these founders who are able to sell locked secondaries and just like, you know, sell them to OTC. And, you know, I know of multiple founders who've cashed out, you know, 30 million, 50 million, 80 million. You know, you're in your mid, late 20s, early 30s, let's say, and you've cashed out 50, 80 million dollars and you're at the early stages of your project. Are you really going to hustle the same way anymore? I mean, I've never been in the position to say I would or wouldn't. I'm not worth nearly that kind of money, but be a big question mark.
Definitely.
You know?
Definitely. But there's parallels between traditional tech and music and all of these kind of areas where some people do it for the love of the game, and you can tell. You know, Jordan, you know, in the great interview where he's like, someone said something about it and he said, and I took that personally.
Yeah.
You're already winning, dude. Like, it doesn't matter, but it's the love of the game, I think. And when
Yeah.
you see people that do things because they love it and they just want to win, I think that shines through all the time. Because you're not playing, you know, status games. You're not even playing wealth games. You're just playing what is the actual game. And knowing the rules and knowing how to play the game is probably the most important skill in crypto.
Yeah. I would completely agree. But it's very hard to find the people that are really in it for that long term. Because if you're in a position where you can cash out,
what do you do when the going gets tough?
What do you do when the going gets tough? And what is it that was motivating you in the first place? Like for me, I'm not motivated by the money of it. I think that there's a lot of ways to make a lot of money. And I'm very blessed to be able to say that the necessities of my life are taken care of in a more than satisfactory way because of having spent so much time in this industry. But like, I still have a mortgage. I still have student loans. I don't drive a Ferrari. I don't have a fancy watch collection. I'm also not motivated necessarily by those things. Don't get me wrong. Like when I have the money, like I will have a Lambo. Like I will like wear a platinum day date Rolex, right? I will 100%.
Because you like nice things. It's okay.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Okay to
there's
like
nothing.
Things.
There's nothing bad about those nice things, but I'm not motivated.
But they're a byproduct.
They're a
not a goal.
byproduct. Yeah, they should be a byproduct of that. They shouldn't be the main driver.
With the hip hop parallels, I think there's so much discourse in crypto that's like, who's real cypherpunk, who's not real, who's real crypto. Like we've kind of been talking about this, right?
Yeah.
Who's in this for the long haul? And that comes all the time with music.
Yeah.
Who's really from the hood? Who's really making music?
The backpack rappers versus the hood
or the
rappers.
SoundCloud mumblers. Like I think every generation has, no, we were real. These guys, I don't know what these people are doing.
Yeah.
Where do you see that play out in our industry?
Oh, that's a great question, man. I think that what we're going to find will be the people who find a way to bridge between the two are going to be the ones who can outlast. And so to me, like the true cypherpunks are the I guess like the most deafs and the Common and the Talib Kwalis who are, you know, the super conscious rappers and the ones who are like all about that. And in many ways, like I see those parallels. And then there's the ones who are the hyper consumerist as well. Oh man, this is a great question.
Because there's almost a Venn diagram, right? Because you do have the musicians that do pump and dumps.
Yeah.
And they're usually the same musicians that are not real.
What are your thoughts on this? I'm actually curious.
I think the question of realness and identity stems from even like before the blues era towards religion and identity and all of these things. I really deeply believe that all of these things are like external manifestations of really deeper questions about what it means to be a person.
Totally.
And what it means to be a person in relation to other people.
Yeah.
And maybe this is just someone maybe on the spectrum looking way too much into stuff, but like those relationships between groups and people and in and other, like for example with Yuval Harari on Sapiens, shared myths.
Yeah.
And how closely you adhere to that myth is an expression of how much you identify with the community and how much you signal to that community.
Yeah.
And then within that community, there are power structures. And then those power structures aren't necessarily like financial or even power. They're about signaling and culture. How close are you to the original gospel?
Yeah.
And then you have sects within those gospels. So I guess from the music side, from the blues side, there were people that were originally from the suffering. You know, these were songs, you know, sang on the plantations. And then people started to make money, right? A bit later. And then, are they real? And then other people came in who were like potentially white artists that then did the blues. And then that was considered appropriation. And I see both sides. Because like if there's someone who's not from that making money that could be going to that, then those people originally, then I can see why that's not a good thing. But I also believe in positive sum games as well, because, you know, the music piracy, for example, really big issue. But I know that a lot of songs that I downloaded illegally are ones that as an adult, like I'll just buy the album because I like it.
Yeah.
So anyway, going back to crypto, I think that the religious element and the signaling element of who's real is a constantly changing thing. The more you try and tell people you're real, I think that the more it's like a recursive cycle where people are like, well, I mean, if someone says to you, trust me, I'm like, what do I need to trust you for, right?
Yeah.
So the only way to do it, and I see this as like almost like physics terminology of space-time, where there's cultural space-time as well.
Yeah.
So you have who is leading the cultural space-time right now, right?
Yeah.
And this is usually an underground. It's always been kind of, you know, in the 80s in New York, in LGBT areas and wherever the edges are of stuff and where the money is not clustered is probably where
you need to go.
Where you need to be. But the thing is that you don't know which edge of cultural space-time is going to do well. Yeah. So the only, I think, winning plus EV strategy as an individual is just be yourself.
100%.
Because you don't know.
100%. 100%. I think who will inevitably win will be the person that is the Drake of these things. Because if you think about Drake, he is a cultural chameleon. Drake has like 11 genres of music that he does, and he
appeals
does
to my mom. He appeals to me. He appeals to people that are like in the streets. Like it is.
He does things exceptionally for multiple genres. And if you think back to him, he's a trained actor, and so you know, Drake is the idea of Drake is the best method acting ever, right? Is to me like you know he Aubrey Drake Graham as Drake is the best acting performance in history to me.
When he went to the UK, discovered grime, suddenly haircut change, beard change, tattoos.
And you know what's crazy is if you go back, he did interviews that were like, 2011, 2012, talking about the music that he found in the UK that he loved before anyone was talking about it.
Yes.
It's an article I've been meaning to write, actually. I think Drake's ability to do pattern recognition and pattern matching is unparalleled. I think there's no one who understands how he went about doing this, from music, fashion, streaming. He understands where the trends are going. And it's, if you look at his earlier interviews, he's just a huge music nerd.
He's curious.
He's a super curious guy who's a music nerd. And he was always he studied hip hop. And you can tell it, he studies things and he's driven by his curiosity. So when he was going to the UK in 2011, 2012, paying attention to what was going on with those artists when no one else was, he was taking up understanding that space of where no one is. And he understands how he can be able to use that where he has his fame and he has his money and he has that influence. Even now, he dropped a record called What Did I Miss last weekend. And the background vocals on it were from a German artist who has 3,000 followers on Instagram named Evan. Someone random. His ability to understand how you can step outside of these traditional norms and then sort of be able to see where he sees these artists being able to go. That ability to reimagine yourself in this era continually and to refresh yourself. He's the best A&R I've ever seen. And it's across things because he sees where things are going. He was paying attention and hanging out with all of the biggest streamers, the Kai Cenats, the Aiden Rosses, all of them, the Duke Dennis, way before anyone was talking about streaming stuff. And so now when he went about doing the What Did I Miss music video last week, it was just randomly set up a stream and people ended up joining the stream. And then people realized afterwards how he did it live and made a music video that way through a real streaming setup.
Beautiful.
And it's just because he sees it.
Yeah.
And now he created hours of content. The hours of content weren't for any reason other than the fact that all of that material can now go to streamers who can clip that content. And if you go on TikTok, which is where all of the younger people live, every single person is making their own take using the excess amount of video that he created for people to play with it in their own ways, using their own creative direction. And that is how, despite losing the battle against Kendrick Lamar last year, he's already back. It's fascinating to me.
Yes.
Completely fascinating. And so for me is how do I continue to study a Drake, or before him there was a Jay-Z, to be able to see in the small ways that I can, in the work that I do, what are the parallels that I can create that will allow me to create similar amounts of success in my own niche.
I love that example because one thing that I saw recently was All American Rejects blowing up everywhere. Not because they've got some crazy PR campaign, not because they're spending loads on creators. They're just turning up to colleges in the States and playing house parties.
Interesting.
And in today's world of hyper productized stuff and curated stuff, the moment is so rare where you actually live. There's a great quote which is, today's generation lives current life as an anticipated memory because everything you do is is it going to go on the gram? I remember when, this is just old man shouting at the clouds, right? I remember when you go for a meal with friends and you cheers and that's it.
Yeah.
Now, 8 times out of 10, if I'm with kind of a larger group where people don't know each other that well, people will still put the phone out and then do the cheers without doing the actual cheers. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Interesting.
And you're prioritizing your digital life over your lived life. And I think Gen Alpha, Gen Z are reacting so heavily to that because we as millennials got one-shotted by Facebook, Instagram, even TikTok, right?
Yep.
And TikTok is the future, but not because of consumption, because of curation and creation.
Yeah.
I think we're reacting against consumption.
And it's so interesting because Instagram was made as the everything needs to be perfect.
Yes.
And if you look at some of the best creators on TikTok, they're wearing their random socks, their makeup isn't done, their hair isn't done, and they're just sort of they're using wired headphones, and the idea is like to show and simulate realness more in a way,
Exactly.
as opposed to the hyper curated perfection that comes with putting your photos on Instagram that the last generation was doing. And there's like a movement against that when I look at what's going on TikTok and when I look at what younger folks are doing on there.
There is. And then just like, water in a tank, you get waves and counter waves, right? And then you get these people that are jumping on board of this and trying to be like, oh, no, I'm authentic too. I'm doing crazy. I'm a little weird. I'm a little strange.
Yeah.
And then you can usually tell.
You can tell.
You can
and it
always
goes back
tell.
to that authenticity thing, right? Where you can like, you can't describe it, but you can feel it.
You can just tell. 100%. It is like, you're a New Yorker born and bred, right? And some people say that they're a New Yorker first and American second.
My wife would tell you, my wife actually brings exactly this up all the time. She's like, Azeem isn't an American first. He's a New Yorker first.
Yeah, and I love that identity. There's something really special about it. But the reason I brought it up was I spent a lot of time in New York, kind of maybe like 2018, 2019. And there was a period of time where I was going around, Chelsea, West Village, East Village, Williamsburg. And I'd see extremely wealthy people dressing extremely not wealthy.
The cosplaying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And especially in Williamsburg.
Yeah, especially in Williamsburg.
And that's been happening, I think, for a long time in today's modern society. Because the Sri Lankan example is when I used to go back when I was younger, and like I was super into fitness. I wish I had more time now, but I'd go back and my family, like kind of more distant family, would be like, are you okay? Are you eating right? Because, as a signaling thing, being wealthy was being fat.
Yeah.
In Asia, right? Like,
yeah.
He's doing well.
Same thing as, because my family's from Pakistan. Being dark, I realized was bad because it meant you had to work the fields.
Yes.
Wealth meant you didn't have to work outside. And so what's fascinating about that growing up here or in the West for me was for us, wealth signaled being able to be darker because it meant during the winter months, you could go to Florida or the Bahamas to get a tan. If you could afford to maintain a tan, it actually showed that you had wealth. And then people tried to simulate it, going to tanning salons.
Exactly.
But really, it's that idea of like when you're a little bit darker, it shows wealth. Whereas in the East, being darker shows poverty.
Dude,
and so similarly, like
it's so true, man.
Like,
growing up, I didn't know why my parents cared so. Like they're like secular, they're pretty liberal, like the old liberal. I don't mean the new liberal. But like, and I remember growing up and they were like, make sure you don't get burned. I was like, I've got sunscreen. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, wear a long sleeve. And I'm like, why? Like now I go on holiday with my wife and like, I don't need to sunbed, right? I don't need to suntan, but like I'll be in the beach and the pool and like, I'm not going to like, I remember my parents like religiously getting under umbrellas and stuff because they didn't want to do it. And like, that's just power structures, right?
Yeah. So it goes back to exactly what you're saying is like being healthy, as they call it, being a little bit more overweight indicated money.
Yeah.
You
got the food.
Yeah. You have food.
Yeah. Which is funny because in Top Boy, they call the drugs food, right?
Yeah. Top Boy is such a good show. Going back to Drake again.
Yeah.
Drake ended up bringing that back and allowing it to see the light of day. He was an executive producer on the more recent seasons that came out in the last few years.
Amazing. It was so good. Like, if you had to look at our industry, right? And I think there's a push towards going from brand comms to founder comms, which has already happened.
Yeah.
But there's moving towards, like with Cluely, is the gap between product and promise is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and more polarizing. Because if they came out with, we have a amazing, low latency, very intelligent way of being an always on-screen assistant, I don't think they would have raised 15 million from A16Z, right?
Nope.
Roy Lee is, I think, a genuine genius.
I agree.
The bad things people say about him, I kind of miss the point is, as you said, he's kind of like Drake. He's recognized a change before everyone else has. And like the William Gibson quote of the future's here, already here, it's just unevenly distributed.
Yeah.
People that can recognize uneven distributions of future patterns always succeed,
100%.
I think.
100%. I know a lot of people who've talked to me about that kid, and I was like, look, the reality about him is that I think A16Z was smart to make that bet because either he's going to be a huge success or he's not. It's a very binary play. I do think, though, the scary thing about it is that now every single person is trying to put out the same style videos. And the thing that I find interesting about that is that, what we're doing at Miden has been, I'm going to go the exact opposite route. That's not a game that I understand how to win. And so I'm not going to try to win. We're more interested in how do you use 2D animation? How do we move away from everywhere you look now? It's like everyone's using VO and AI to make a video of a monkey having a conversation with you about their new product. And everything looks the same.
It's a lack of imagination.
Yeah, and now everyone wants to do videos just like Roy Lee. You see people on social media every day. If you know how to make videos like that, contact me. Budget's not an issue. And I'm like, why do you want to just copy?
Why are you following?
Yeah, right.
And that's like music.
Yeah, so I'm like, we're looking at it where I'm like, I want to go the exact opposite way.
Yes.
Like I'm like, nope, like we can't win that game. But I think like doing 2D animation, thinking back to how Disney worked, like all of those things, there's actually more interesting things to play with that then allow you to aesthetically be different. But again, it's always a risk. Right?
It is a risk.
Like it's a risk. Now the safe bet is, well, everyone should do stuff like Roy Lee. And I'm like, I will not. Unless Roy Lee is on my team, then Roy can absolutely run with it. But Roy is not on my team. And it doesn't make sense. And it wouldn't be authentic to me. I very much appreciate it. I'm not one of his haters.
Beautifully executed.
Yeah, beautifully executed.
Amazing.
But
these executions are once in an era, I think.
Yes.
And I think eras are different sizes of different categories, and they can be within each other.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember when stock photos were like a thing on websites, right? And then Unsplash came out and everyone got free stock photos.
Yep.
They vanished overnight.
Yeah. Actually, my first startup in 2013, after I ran the marathon, I was going to go to medical school, decided to rescind my ops from medical school. I was working in biotech, quit my biotech job, and I went all in on a company that I'd been part-time founder on. It was called SupShot, like Sup. And the idea was just photos and videos on your smartphone that you could license. And so I'd been chatting with the Getty Images and the Shutterstocks and all of them for what we were doing. I think the big mistake we made was we went for that more journalism angle as opposed to B2B stock photography, so that we would have been, making something that a big company would have purchased. But weirdly enough, do know quite a bit about like that stock photography stuff because of that startup.
100%. That's such an interesting. So I also had a photography startup.
Really?
At university. Very different. It was, I recognized the gap between, there was a big market in the kind of lower middle where you're not an amateur, you don't have the funds for a big brand, but around that time, loads of people trying to start fashion brands. It was like kind of the artisanal kind of start your own fashion brand era. And people couldn't afford good photographers. I knew a bunch of students who had very expensive cameras and loved photography, but needed experience. So trying to make a thing that connected these students with good camera skills,
Good marketplace,
and these people that needed branding and clothes, and like try to do deals, like I guess advisory clothes allocations, right? Early drops, all that kind of stuff. Trying to make it a lifestyle. What I didn't count on, because the business model was solid, the economics made sense. Students don't turn up anywhere on time.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So sometimes there are these orthogonal issues with business models that you don't realize until you do it. Right?
Yeah.
But going back to stock photos, it was a signaling mechanism because it's expensive for stock photos. Unsplash came out, evaporated overnight.
Yeah.
Same thing with VO now. Like, I think one of the best examples that just came out recently was WAP did a GTA style video about their platform. I'll show it to you later once we finish. But it made me feel something. Like, I've not seen an AI video that made me feel something in a very long time.
Interesting.
I need to see that. And I think that's the key, is like, it doesn't matter what the medium is. It's, can you do it well and execute well? Because
Absolutely.
everyone's copying Roy Lee to some extent in SF, because I saw a great tweet about SF, which is, it is a city of Russian dolls of signaling. I don't mean specific to Russia, but like layers of layers of layers of layers of trying to assume an identity to get one of three outcomes: attention, raise a fund, or get status.
Yeah.
And I think there's only 6 resources in the world: time, power, capital, distribution, information, and people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everyone's trying to get one of those 6, and they're usually driven by one of 5 things, right? Like sex, cash, internal validation, external validation, or just straight up for the purpose, finding like a mission, right?
Yeah.
And I think SF has this weird atmosphere of people like, when they meet someone, it's like, oh, so who'd you raise with? And I think that happens in crypto too, because you go to conferences, and we were talking about this, right?
Yeah.
Like the value extraction of like, not like, what's your name? How's it going? What do you do? It's just like, who are your investors? Oh, can you help me? No. Okay. Screw you. See you later.
Yeah.
What's your experience? Because, you've been in the position where people are coming to you, right? And you've seen it in music, seen it in fame. Like, how do you deal with that as a person who's able to give people things?
I've someone who, as a whole, has always been very easy to access in general,
Mhm.
right? I make myself extremely easy to get to. And it's sort of the way I go about culture, community, brand, relationship building is that I don't put myself in a position where I'm like, I'm above others. I think there's
Mm.
always something to learn from others. I think there's always potential value to be had in having that sort of humility. But it's required, and perhaps the music industry has helped with it a lot, is I've had to learn how to really trust my gut in talking to people very quickly and
Mm.
making judgment calls about people and being able to say that I'm going to trust people to be who they are. Now,
Mm.
that requires me to be really good at trying to understand who they are. But for me, it's absolutely been that because, right now with Miden, we have a bunch of amazing angels, A16Z, 1KX, and Hack co-led our $25 million seed round. When I was a co-founder at Morph, we had raised $20 million with Dragonfly, Pantera, Spartan Group, and others. And prior to that, when I was at Gitcoin DAO, and I'd co-raised a $9 million treasury diversification round with OKX and Protocol Labs and a bunch of others. I'd raised what must have been somewhere between $12 and $15 million that we distributed to grantees because I oversaw the grants program and knew centralized exchanges, the venture funds, high net worth individuals, the protocols, all of those things. So for years now, I've constantly been in a position where I would be able to unlock a lot of things for a lot of people, but it's required listening to my gut and trusting my gut as I meet people, when I meet people. Sometimes I absolutely want to help people, but I look at them and I go, you're not ready yet for
Mm.
even getting that help. And I take my time getting to know people. In general, how all of this stuff works is interesting on the human level.
Mm.
Is that if you are going to make an introduction at the end of the day, it's not just about making sure that you're having it work for one side. It's trying to set it up where you put a play together that helps both parties.
Mhm.
And so I am easy to get to, but I'm not necessarily someone who unlocks that for just everyone because you have to be really careful about doing it. You're burning favors, right? I have a very famous quote. I don't know who said it, but I don't do favors, I collect debt. And so you have to think about it from that perspective. And
Mhm.
when I do that, I introduce people all the time if it's a right fit. And I go out of my way not to be the person who's trying to get their cut either. I'm like, introduce you guys, you go do whatever. Oh, Azeem, I don't want anything. I don't need anything.
Mm.
Right. But I think, maybe it was partially growing up in a more ghetto hood street situation and learning to understand the nuances that come with being able to assess your surrounding easily. Then it was spending time in the music industry and really deeply trying to understand those kind of cues of people. And maybe it's just also part of just how I am. But, my wife and I talk a lot about, I make very instant judgment calls on people. And there's been a lot of times where she'll be like, that was really harsh. You only, spoke to them for 15 minutes. And I'm like, no, you'll see. And, time passes. And then she's like, how did you know? And I'm like, it was the tone of their voice. It was the way that they talked about their relationship with their families. There are things that I'm like, you're able to take from something else and just to parallelly apply it. And so for me, it's always being able to try to utilize those things when it comes to that. But I've totally seen, even the difference between, Dragonfly and Pantera are absolutely tier one investors.
Mm.
The way that people talk to us and treat me because A16Z is on the cap table is so fascinating. Like the difference that I've seen in how extra nice people are to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's weird. It makes you feel uncomfortable.
It's very uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable. Because you realize these are things that have nothing to do with you at the end of the day, too.
Yeah.
You know, that
It's a shell covering.
yeah. And so, I found one of the best aspects of having A16Z, let's say, as investors, even though they're actually extremely helpful. I did a tweet yesterday about one of the people in their finance department, Emily Westerhold. She took time out of her schedule when I wanted to talk to her about how banking needs would work for us. We have a bunch of money. What are we supposed to do with it? Like, no one on the team's a finance expert. No one's a CFO. Where do we bank? Who do we bank with? What neobanks do we pick? How should we go about collecting yield? There's so many questions that come with this. Should we be worried about debanking? I'm a U.S. citizen. What comes with that? I don't know any of this stuff. Got on a call with her. She explained everything to me. And these are the kinds of things that when I talk to people about having like real value add investors, these are the things that matter.
Yep.
But one of the most fascinating things about A16Z for me so far has been similar to Rock Nation, was that having the name there for you opens doors.
Does.
And if you know how to leverage having the name, it opens doors for you. So when I go talk to TradFi companies about what we want to do with Miden and working with them, A16Z names opens doors. When we did our fundraising announcement, we got covered by Fortune, The Block, CoinDesk, Cointelegraph, Decrypt, a bunch of others. Wall Street Journal even did a line in one of their newsletters. But what was really captured was A16Z being there.
Yeah.
And so people want, Fortune's headline for their article was Andreessen Horowitz invests in, even though A16 is actually super particular, A16Z crypto, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, people know, and Andreessen Horowitz, A16Z. And I've seen in such a short period of time just how much having that name there can leverage things for you. And if you're smart about that, what that can do for you, but being smart also about not overdoing it.
Yes, has to be subtlety.
Yeah.
Like I watched Mark Andreessen on Uncapped recently, and the pattern matching about an imperfect present to what the future should be that he did, that he talked about, was how traditional firms had always been hands off. You're lucky to have us. We're going to give you money, but you don't get much because we're here. We've got money. What more do you want?
Yeah.
And his thesis was, this is going to change because we need to be out there helping people. And I watched that. And the same week, I had a call with Medi from Dragonfly, amazing head of recruiting. And then, super open because, I was at that point, I was looking at kind of what's next for me, what's next for my roles in crypto. And then the same week I wrote an article, and I think X is one of the, say what you want about it, but like as a random person who used to be a doctor writing an article that gets picked up by like Coin Bureau, and then you very kindly quoted me on the Katana one.
Yes.
Appreciate that for Forbes, but like it's just the biggest meritocracy. And I think, I DM'd Haseeb because I love his writing, I love his blog articles. I used his 10 rules for negotiation in all of my job negotiations because it is the single best, I think for anyone at home, like it's probably the single best piece of writing on how to understand tech hiring.
I'll have to read that. Haseeb is awesome, by the way. He was the lead that we had when we did the Morph deal. I'm a big fan of Haseeb.
And like I DM'd the guy on X, and he's like a celebrity on X, right?
Yeah.
Just like literally just for like, hey, I wrote this.
Yeah.
I would love some feedback. And he got back to me with like some really honest feedback. And it was just so refreshing to have. And I think going back to what you were saying about investors and people and how you judge people is like, I can't remember, my dad always used to say this, but it's probably from another quote, but like, how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah.
So someone at a coffee shop or a restaurant who's talking shit to the waiter is a moment of unguarded performance.
Absolutely.
And you know that if they're doing that or they're talking shit about someone else behind their back, they're going to do that about you too.
100%.
So yeah, I totally get you on snap judgments because it's pretty rare that you're wrong, It
has absolutely been the case. Like, it's not to say I am never wrong, but it's a general trajectory of where I look at it. And I go, statistically speaking, if I'm right 9 out of 10 times, 9.5 out of 10 times, that's okay. Like, it's okay to be wrong, but I continue to use those things to guide me. And so it's definitely been very helpful because now even more, such a big part of your job as a crypto founder is to act like a pseudo celebrity.
Yes.
And And so that means that you're supposed to go out of your way to do and say things that will help generate attention.
Mm.
And when you generate attention, that naturally brings certain kinds of inbound. And when you're inundated with more inbound, you have to become way better at being able to make snap judgments without having access to absolutely all the information. So it's just a necessity in survival.
Because you can either have gatekeepers,
Yeah.
or you have to do it yourself and be quick.
Yeah, which I'm not a fan of having the gatekeepers. You know, my DMs are open on Twitter. People message me on Telegram. I mean, I think that's how we connected.
That's how we
originally,
did. Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like was just like, oh yeah, sure.
I like your writing. Let's talk.
Yeah, sure. Let's talk. You know,
And now we're here, dude. I love it. This is the best. You know, I keep saying it, but I think it's the greatest game on earth. It is the perfect intersection of culture, finance, technology, and people.
Yeah.
Right. And I think I love it. Like you said, I don't know where it's going to go.
no
but
clue. Yeah,
just enjoy the ride, dude.
that's exactly how I see it. I'm doing it because I'm enjoying it.
Mm.
You know, like each step of this has been further getting involved and just enjoying it and knowing that I'm fortunate enough to be able to help take care of my family with this.
Mm.
And that's all that really matters. I get to enjoy what I'm doing on a daily basis. I get to take care of my family. Crypto allows us to, we complain about it, but travel the world in ways that most people don't get to. And so I see it as a massive blessing, massive, massive blessing.
How did you make the decision to rescind your med school place? Because, you know, I quit being a doctor, but I did it very late. I think I was maybe first generation immigrant. You know, you have three options, right? Doctor, lawyer, engineer, which is a pretty good strategy if you think about it in poker
100%.
terms, right?
100%.
Safe, meritocratic. Back in the days where, you know, being the wrong color, and still is in some industries, is a definite like barrier to you.
Yep.
Can't get in the right private clubs, can't get into the right meetings, you're not invited for dinners.
Yeah.
Still happens, right? I'm not a, you know, I think I always have to preface this kind of stuff with like, my politics are probably more like center right, center left. I don't know, kind of center. Maybe today's day is probably considered more center right. I don't know. But, you know, these industries are generally meritocratic. And I think crypto has a lot of echoes of that to some extent.
Yep.
People from different backgrounds can make it no matter what.
It's extremely Darwinian.
Yes.
But it is meritocratic still.
Yes.
You know,
how did you make the decision to give up? I mean, I know it wasn't directly crypto, but like, why did you give up the med school place?
It's doing it for the wrong reasons to begin with. And I had headed down that path for the wrong reasons. And I wasn't necessarily sure how to step away from it. And everyone around me was like, what are you doing? You're not meant for medicine. And then when I ran the marathon, and I ran with a friend who ran with me for the first 17 miles of the race. And then he was like, Azeem, go ahead. And I ran at his pace as opposed to him running at my pace for that 17 miles. And had I run at my own pace without him, my timing would have put me at the finish line around the time of the explosions. And then later that week as well, living in Cambridge and everything going on with the lockdown, and you know, more people died. It was an MIT officer that was killed. And it was just a week of a lot of very serious introspection in terms of could have died once, if not more than once this week. And it was a very real way to see just how short life is. And so I just sort of decided I didn't want to do anything that I didn't absolutely love anymore, ever again. And so I was working in a great biotech job, quit that, rescinded my offers from med school, decided to go full-time into this startup that I'd been doing part-time, and just told myself I'd figure it out. And has been a journey since of following my passions and curiosities with full fervor throughout the entirety of that process. And when there were times that came that I felt like the passion was gone and I didn't know why I was doing it anymore, or if I was doing it for the wrong reasons, I just stopped. I've made 180-degree turns in my career since in ways that, you know, I took a lot of the learnings, but I'm not actively involved in those things anymore, just because whether it was I realized I was doing it for the wrong reasons or passion was, whatever it was, and have continued to do exactly that. Right now, I'm absolutely, you know, astonished by everything that we're learning in this industry, but I wouldn't be surprised if at some point, if I feel like I've done enough for something, then I move on to something completely different.
Mhm. There's a certain freedom in that, like courage and freedom to, because people say like, oh yeah, take risks, but taking risks is hard.
Yeah.
Especially
Yeah.
not from a bad thing to a good thing, but from like a good thing to a better thing,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
knowing what you're going to do.
Absolutely. I think it's not that there is no fear. It's just acting in spite of fear,
Mhm.
right? I think that's the reality of it. Not to
Mhm.
have fear would sort of be dumb. I think
Yeah.
fear is like an intrinsic thing that's been built into our amygdalas that's there for a reason. Like, be scared of the lion, right?
Mm.
If you're not scared of the lion, like, right?
Yeah, you're going to get eaten.
Right? Exactly. Right. But for me, yeah, it definitely brings a certain freedom. I just, after those kinds of like potentially near death experiences, you realize what really is risk,
Mhm.
right? What's the worst that could happen?
Mhm.
What are the statistical probabilities? And you can sort of play math with it where like the worst possible thing basically never occurs,
Yeah.
right? And so if the worst possible thing is not going to occur, and then there's a potential best possible thing, and you get to play in this middle space, why not?
Why not do what you actually want to do?
Yeah, exactly.
There's so many parallels with, I guess, gambling and risk management, because that's life. It's a series of branching trees of traversal outcomes
Yeah.
that you're making with imperfect decisions. It's funny about the near death thing. So when I was 21, I was very different in the way that like I liked to have fun. Right.
Mhm.
Everyone when they're young, they like to party a lot. Went out one night and got pretty wasted on my birthday with my friends.
Yeah.
And there's a half pipe on the way to university. Like we got the bus every day,
Yeah.
right? And I wasn't much of a skater. I could skate. I love skating. I love Tony Hawk. I love the culture. Bob
Yeah.
Burnquist. Rodney Mullen. Loved that culture. And anyway, on my birthday night, I was like, it's like, I don't know, 1 a.m. Everyone's like on a high. And we're like, dude, let's go do the half pipe. Middle of the night, I'm in a suit.
Okay.
Right. Skate down there, do the half pipe, go down. Never done a half pipe before in my life. Managed to drop in okay, because I guess I was so drunk, like I didn't. Because when people do half pipes, they hesitate. They kind of go backwards.
Yeah.
But I dropped in. It was fine, and I was celebrating. And when I got to the safest part of the half pipe, which is the flat part, I kind of forgot what I was doing, and I was just celebrating. And I kind of started going up the other side, and then it went backwards. I hit my head. I don't know what happened. I was out.
Yeah.
And I ended up in hospital, had a brain bleed. I was in ICU for like a couple of days, had no memory for like a whole, like 3-4 weeks, no short-term memory,
Yeah.
which must have been horrific for my mum and dad. And then during that period of university, I couldn't write essays because couldn't hold stuff in my brain. So I had to like put Post-it notes together to like hold multiple things at the same time to write these things, right? And the irony was, the essay, I got a better mark than I was getting before my accident, which, so like, these kind of things can shape you in different ways. But the whole point is that after those things happen, you realize, oh, it can just go at any minute. And then there's a Thoreau quote, which is, most men live lives of quiet desperation. Like most people live lives of quiet desperation because they're trapped by whatever they're afraid of. And like my WhatsApp picture is like a meme, the classic like Wojak meme, but it's just a comic strip, which is a dude in bed, just like, what if it doesn't work? And then like an anime guy just being like, brother, what if it does? And then like, I think that's the way to like live life,
I'll give you used Thoreau. I'll give you a Nicki Minaj quote.
Yeah.
Everyone dies, but not everyone lives.
Oh, I love that dude.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's similar, right? Like, because it is like, what if it does work? Like, what if it works out to be better than you can even imagine? Because if I'm really honest, like life has turned out better than I could have anticipated, better than I could have dreamed of. And what if that continues? And I think, there is no replay for this. We live once and then that's it. It's over. And so why not live the way you want?
Yep.
And
I think there's the deeper side of that, which people always resonate with. And then they're like, oh, how do I actually apply that to my life? I'm on a 9-to-5, or I work for a crypto company and I want to make this strategy. I guess it just comes from like doing stuff that you think will work, but it's not. I think most companies are built of risk avoidance machines that are essentially like, you'll never get fired for buying IBM stock back in the 90s, right?
Yep.
So everyone bought IBM stock because no one was going to like fire you if you got it wrong, because I guess the negative convexity of the result is basically like, if the bad thing happens and you do what everyone else does, no one blames you.
Yeah.
And if the good thing happens, great. But if the bad thing happens and you've taken a risk, people are like,
Yeah.
you shouldn't have done that. Why'd you do that? And
Yeah.
I think that's something that happens like both at a founder level and an employee level. Like,
Mhm.
how do you manage risk in Miden in terms of decision making? What's your framework?
It's a great question. We're at the earlier stages of a lot of this. I think
Mhm.
one of the best ways for me to look at it is that I do everything I can to have decision making actually be without hierarchical decision makers.
Mm.
I think that everyone can and should have a valid opinion about how we go about doing things. And for the most part, and I've done this everywhere I go, but I treat everyone's opinions with equal weight.
Mm.
And so it's not because I'm the founder, I am right. It's let's have a logical conversation among whoever is potentially involved in this decision. And let's decide how we should go about doing it based on the ideas that win, whether it's a single person's ideas or an amalgamation of ideas that come together after having a conversation.
Mhm.
Trusting that you have smart people around you, trusting those people's thoughts, and then finding a way with as low ego as possible to be able to figure out how to move forward.
Mhm.
I think it's sort of just generally been like an outlook that I take with me in life.
Mhm.
And so far it's proved to work. And so, we haven't had to have any like very high risk decisions and how, or
Mhm.
maybe we already have, like we're deciding, the way we'll go about ecosystem building and
Mhm.
product strategy and things like that. But a lot of it has already still come down to let's bring the people into the room. Let's have a conversation with each other. Let's each bring our own ideas. And then let's see which ideas make the most sense.
Mhm.
And ideas win, not, it's not based on like the person who's bringing the idea.
Mhm.
And so in general, I think it's a way that I like to operate. And it's what we plan on doing at Miden as a whole is sort of that sort of non-hierarchical way of going about making decisions. And I think that it's a way to hedge risks.
Mhm. I like that view. I think my experience of that has been twofold in both the medical field and when I built my previous company, which was an agency. Um, Flat hierarchies work in situations where there are options to take, but they're like information driven. If the way ahead is not clear at all,
Yeah.
and there are sharp cliff faces on either side,
Yeah.
then I think there has to be a leader.
For that, we haven't, or maybe we already sort of have come to that,
Mhm.
where there are things where I've definitely had to go about being like, we'll go about doing it
Mm.
like this. I think as we get closer to mainnet, those
Mm.
are going to be more real decisions that we
Yeah.
have to make. But we'll see how that plays out. I'm confident in that I will very likely go against the grain of decision making and how we go about doing things.
Mhm.
And I will, and I've already in some of our things had to say like, just trust me,
Yes.
right?
Mm.
Is just trust me. And it was, what my team, brilliant and exceptional people. My CTO, Bobbin, he did early ZK work at the Ethereum Foundation before even the Starkware folks. He went on to go lead the ZK team at Facebook for years when the whole Facebook crypto operation disbanded. He went on to then go become a co-founder at Polygon and had been
Mhm.
building out Miden for years now, since the end of 2021.
Mhm.
Dominic got into crypto around 2016, ended up spending time at Raiden, at Consensus, at Polygon, has been working with Bobbin. He's deeply product and ecosystem focused. And then Bobbin is deeply technical in ways that are like beyond savant like, right? And my team are like the smartest of math people in ways that they like make math jokes to each other about stuff that I don't even understand. And then I come in and I'm more of the like narrative, ecosystem, branding, PR,
Mhm.
token, all those kinds of things, and sort of understanding how I feel we should go about doing that. And I do think one of the places when like, we have flat hierarchies for a lot of things, but we also trust each other.
That's
in
important.
who knows what at what they're doing. And so at no point will I go into Bobbin and say our client side proving should work in this way, right? Because I understand that that is his expertise. And then when it comes to who should we be talking to as investors, how should we go about doing it, who should be on the cap table, what liquid funds and market makers and exchanges do we need to talk to? Are we going to do an InfoFi campaign or not? When are we going to do that? Do we bring on KOLs? Which ones? All of those things are more so like, okay, cool, we'll trust Azeem. And so I think as we get towards mainnet, some of those decisions will become more real. Whereas right now, those decisions are more so being made from the technical team where I don't have to involve myself and I don't have strong opinions on how things are going to go. But I am excited to go about making some of those decisions when time comes because I'm looking forward to making decisions that don't make sense to anyone else.
I like that model of thinking.
Yeah.
I interviewed Marco from his new, where he's got a new, he was previously at Primitive, but he's got his own fund now. He talks about contrarian investing and human-centric investing. And I like the idea of do things that don't make sense at the time.
Yeah.
Because they're usually the plus EV bets that work out in the end. But I like that culture, which is each to their own domain.
Yes.
Because you got to trust people.
You have to. You know, it's I think the job that I see of myself most oftentimes, the Union Square Ventures, Fred, I forget his last name right now, but said the job of a CEO or the job of founder is make sure there's enough money in the bank, always be recruiting, set vision and strategy. That's it. That's your main job. And then Steve Jobs used to talk about, I hire people smarter than me so they can tell me what to do, not so I can tell them what to do. And so, you know, if I have someone who's doing design work with us, if I have someone who's doing compiler work with us, the idea has been you bring on people who are amazing at what they do, and then you let them run with it. And so, yeah, I see it as the only logical way forward is you bring people on because you trust them. Yeah. And then you trust them when time comes for them to make their decisions in their own domains.
And that comes from a core value of courage because trusting someone else is always a risk.
Totally.
And what I've seen a lot of times is teams will either bring in experts or even within teams, especially the non-technical side, it will be seen as kind of like driving. Everyone thinks they're a great driver.
Yeah.
Like so people will say that 80% of people think they're above average drivers, which is statistically impossible.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone thinks that they have a view on non-technical stuff.
Yeah.
Because there is a objectively lower barrier to entry.
Yeah.
But I think a much harder thing to master to a degree where you're effective.
Totally. Totally.
One of the sharpest people I've ever met is Charlie from Nillion, CMO.
Okay.
Seeing him operate on or just deal with problems, you kind of start to see that some people have an immense amount of horsepower under the hood that you can just see like clarity and brevity of being able to deal with a problem. The reason I brought that up is because, you know, when you're making a decision and versus a technical person's making a decision or you bring an external person in, how do you build that framework for them to operate? Because like I've heard a great quote, which is leadership is about bringing the team towards a reality that only you can see and getting them to see it too. And then management is about making sure the stuff just happens to get to that place, right?
Yeah.
How do you do that for people who you're trusting to do stuff? And like, how do you make them get into your vision? Because like, they might be really good at the thing, but it might not fit with your vision.
So I think in general, I've tended to see things in a way where it's talent hits a target no one can hit, genius hits a target no one can see. And there are certain things where each team member will bring and just be like, you just sort of have to trust me. And we've already sort of seen that happen as we've been building out some of the tech stuff. And we have these conversations on a weekly basis. When it comes to hiring, that's actually one of them. Like as we're bringing some non-technical folks on and the majority of the team is technical and we're trying to make decisions. And I'm primarily the main one who's there to say like, this is the person I think we should bring on as head of comms. This is the person I think we should bring on for social media marketing kind of thing. Or, hey, I don't think we need to bring a high-level marketing person on yet, right? Because there's this inherent idea when people raise a bunch of money that you go hire a head of every single vertical like that. And I don't necessarily agree with that, because until you've really defined what it is that someone in a specific role is to be doing, and then you can understand what success looks like for that role, you shouldn't necessarily hire it, because you should be doing it because you want someone who can own that thing. And then you have an understanding of what owning that and creating success for that thing actually is. And so for us, I led all of our comms so far, where, when we did our launch, I was the one who personally reached out to all the media. And to date, I'm the one who reaches out to all of the media. I'm the one who handles, even if, Bobbin was on Andy's roll up recently, was like, I reached out to Andy and set that up. And I was like, Bobbin, you need to be here on June, whatever, at 11 a.m. and this. And so for that has been like a decision-making process where everyone just sort of like, okay, let's trust how we go about doing it. It's all in real time, man. And so much of it is luck too. I don't know. Like, I don't want to bring someone on who's like high level marketing at the moment. And the team, I've had to like help them really see it. And they may not see it, like, but it's been like actively being like, in my mind, I'm like, I don't want to bring someone on as like a head of marketing who I then subconsciously even start to feel like I've outsourced marketing until I've actually defined what our real marketing principles are, as opposed to really defining it out and then realizing I'm at the point where I don't have the time to do this anymore. And there are a lot of busy activities that need to be completed. So we should bring someone on who can then manage those activities. It's a work in progress. I wish I had like a more clear answer for it.
No, I think that's a very clear answer. I think the most important thing you said in that sentence is like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. We talked about that earlier, about something that's very unusual in our industry. And like when you say interviews, I'd love for you to just tell me that story again, because I think you were talking to some investors and you said those words.
Yeah. So there's two investors when I was when we were going about doing Morph, and there was a couple of questions that they asked me in the process of like, like interviewing us, whatever it would be like, if they should invest in us. And there was a couple of questions they asked on how we would go about doing some stuff for ecosystem. And these were two separate investors individually. And I said, I don't know. And I saw it as like, look, like if these people invest despite me saying, I don't know, like that's great. If they don't invest, also that's great. And later when I had conversations with each of them individually, they came back and they said that they invested because I said, I don't know. And they said how rarely they hear that in this industry. Whereas to me, it makes a ton of sense to say, I don't know. The whole point of venture capital is to be able to invest high risk capital in potentially very large outcomes. And to be able to do that, you're not doing things with full assuredness. You're doing things by taking risk. And so part of that risk is not knowing everything. And I think what then comes with that is being humble about knowing when you don't know. Because if you're not, you create a situation where you think you know everything. And there's few things, I think, that will more likely lead to failure than thinking you know everything.
Definitely. Because you also lose trust.
Yeah.
If someone has an answer to everything, you hear this a lot in spaces, actually, quite interesting. And some podcasts, some interviews, and even like on the hiring side, because I've been on both sides of hiring and interviewing, and things I look for are actually abnormally high performance in something that isn't directly related to money.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So if someone's ELO, 1,900 in chess.
Yeah.
Or someone was a professional esports, or they were an Olympic swimmer or something, I will always hire them over someone who has a fancy LinkedIn or a very long experience, because from my experience of kind of hiring, even the interviewing stage or seeing interviews, there are professional meeting winners.
Yeah.
So they
yes. Oh God, that's such a great way to put it. Yeah.
Professional meeting attenders.
They know how to interview well.
Circling back in meetings, saying nice things, saying the S word in a company. The S word in a startup that should never be said is should.
Yeah.
Because it's just a very easy thing to say, like, oh, we should be doing this. And everyone feels good, it's safe. Yeah. There's no actionable.
Yeah.
That really frustrates me because when I was
That's
running.
interesting the way you look at it. I look at it from a passion perspective.
Mm.
I consistently ask people what it is that they do and care about in their time that has nothing to do with work.
Mm.
And recently actually chatted with someone who super clear that they were into fitness.
Mm.
And they ended up telling me this story then about a back injury, which then led them to get into lifting a certain way, which then led them to become a personal trainer, which then led them down a fitness journey. They're telling me about this multi-year thing where they've learned to be genuinely like, top percent. You just look at them and you can see it. And to me, I tend to look for that. And I've never actually defined it that way, but it's important to me. My team sort of laughs because, and my wife does about this too, is that I don't interview people and ask a single question about what tools do you use? How do you do this? Like I like vibe check people. I have I have an interview where like I'll just sit with you and just talk to you because I'm trying to get to know you as a person. Because to me, so much of the work is stuff that can be taught. Like, like you don't know crypto. That's fine. Like you can learn the crypto.
Yep.
But what you can't necessarily learn is, how do you act under pressure? What are you passionate about? How do you deal with discourse? What is your relationship with your family like? Things like that then help me understand sort of what you were saying earlier. The way you do the little things is the way that you do the big things. And so I just have a vibe check of like a conversation with someone. And I'm like, oh, yeah, they'll work, right? Like anything else, like you could learn. Like, but that part, those are ingrained things in people that you can't teach and you can't learn. That's just who they are as people. And so I look for that.
I love that because all the best things in my life have happened from pursuing something that did not have a clear payoff.
Totally. 100%.
And that just comes from interest and passion. These are all proxies for, I think, curiosity and drive without immediate outcomes. And delayed gratification is probably the biggest signaling for intelligence, right? Because you're trying to like find out about the world.
Yeah.
One other thing that, I'm actually just asking you for advice at this point. One other thing that I find really interesting is when you're in a startup or a company, right? There is a balance between action and structure.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to lead stuff, there's a balance between, leader's vision plus giving the team the structure to succeed. And sometimes there's different kinds of people, right? There's people that will say, I will take something with imperfect information, understand your needs, and execute to the best of my ability and check all the way through. And that's like a star player. I've got this, Shawan Puri put out this triangle of competence, which is level 5 is I will find, like you said, the genius thing is I will find problems you didn't think of and then build systems to fix that and then increase efficiency of output. So I think that triangle is how I look at people in hiring. But when you're trying to do something, there's different reactions. You got the good reaction of I'll go do stuff, and then you got the bad reaction of, which I think maybe that's a bias of mine, but like, oh no, we can't start because we need to I need to do a course first, or you need to give me more structure. We need to define things. We need to do like this, that. And it's obviously a spectrum.
Yeah.
But I've always pushed towards that just go and get shit done and work it out as you go along. Where do you sit on that spectrum?
Get shit done. Actually, if anything, I wish that I was better at documenting things. It's one of my things that I'm working at becoming better at. So I've been trying to build systems in place with people who are my direct reports that will allow me to do that in a way that is more optimal to the way that I am. Because I think that one of the things that I lack is sometimes being able to effectively over time sort of communicate the things that I'm doing, why I'm doing those things, and how those things lead to the more overarching goals that everyone is looking to achieve. So even though in my head it makes all the sense in the world and I really actually could explain all of it to you, if I'm not doing the work at doing the explaining over time, that's a failure in leadership of mine. And that is actually absolutely a failure in leadership that I have at this moment that I'm working at bettering, because I think that the team deserves to understand how and why we're doing certain things. There absolutely should be like a level of trust me, but at the same time, your team deserves to be able to understand things. And so for me, it's been, instead of working fully against the grain, is seeing the way that I am, what are the ways that I can more easily optimize to be able to explain stuff better or create structure around it or have people understand some of that thinking.
Mm.
It's not something I'm good at. And I'm very much a person who, if someone's like, Azeem, like, what actually is your job? I'm just like, my job is to get shit done, right? Like, we need to raise money. We need to manage relationships. We need to close a deal. We need to understand how to get to something. We need to get into media, whatever it is. I can make a short, medium, long-term plan to figure out how to get shit done. But I'm not someone who's been as good on the documenting end and historically has not. And I think that at times in the people that I've worked with has caused friction at points because they may see things that I do as lacking structure, lacking reason, seeming erratic. And so it's actually something that, maybe I can't help you with because I have not figured out.
I think we're probably in the same boat. Yeah, I totally get that. One thing that I've found helps is verbal fluency in hiring. 'Cause anyone can write anything in the age of AI. And even with like Cluely and stuff, and when they're interviewing, if someone can speak really, really well and competently, I generally see that as extremely high signal over like a very good written output.
Yeah.
Because it shows how you can think on your feet.
Yeah.
On the structure side, I find that if I record pretty much all my internal team communications, and then I put that into a database, and then I try and extract from that what is going on and build these systems in parallel. So like, and essentially just using a database and AI to be like, oh, what am I actually saying? What is being communicated? Because then often in relationships, there is no third party that can tell you what was actually said. And sometimes it's actually good to have like a third party, even if it's flawed, to be like, you've been communicating this, this, and this over these days. This has been said. This is what needs to be done. And it's really useful, I think, as a tool. I'll show you some of the stuff I use after this.
Yeah,
but,
please.
I totally get it. Like anything, it's a balance, right?
Yeah, totally. It's a balance. And it's one of those things where, going back to being honest with ourselves is knowing I know what I'm really good at. I also know what I'm not good at. And I work at being humble enough to accept the things that I'm not good at and then see what I can do to better those things, while at the same time understanding that there definitely is a phenomenon that I believe to be true where you should double down on your strengths, right? And so I know the things that I'm really good at, and I will continue to put all the effort in to be good at those things. At the same time, that doesn't mean that I'm not in a position where there are things that I can continue to improve.
For sure. I think that, we've explored a lot of your past and your motivations. I want to zoom in a bit more on just the position you're in now, because I think a lot of people, the dream in crypto right now is to be founder, strong investors, a lot of backing.
Yeah.
I want to explore, we talked a little bit about some of the downsides of like, people coming to you and trying to extract from you, but like, what does it feel like? How do you handle it? What are your mental models? What does your day-to-day look like?
A lot of my day-to-day hasn't changed. If I'm really honest with you, I don't see it as I've won in any way, shape, or form. I think that anyone who believes that they've already won when they get to where I am is more likely than not to be able to not continue to win. And so years back, like I was saying, that this is a dream scenario, right? I have over the years gotten investments from the biggest names in this industry. Currently, I'm working with a load of savants backed by some of the best investors, have raised tens of millions of dollars, having conversations about raising even more money. But it reminds me a lot of, ever seen that Kobe Bryant interview where they're like, you're up, 2 games, you don't seem so happy though. Job's not done.
Job's not done.
Job's not done.
Yeah, dude.
Right? And so I perpetually in life just look at things that way. I think that it puts into perspective, how do I keep taking my 1,000 shots a day? What are the things that I need to do to improve? How do I continue to get better? And one of the biggest things that I do is I don't look at anybody else except myself. I compete against myself. And I also see myself as the best competition. Everyone else, when everyone's like, QC so-and-so is competition or so-and-so, I'm like, no, Not at all. If anything, I'll go out of my way to help those people. Like, this is on-chain versus off-chain. The true thesis of Silicon Valley has been that these people would help each other. I'm not going to look at people in a way where I'm like, that's my competitor. We need to make sure to figure out how to dupe them. Not at all. And so for me, I would say nothing's changed. My day-to-day looks like waking up in the morning. I tend to be someone who, when I'm not traveling and jet lagged, I'm usually in bed between 9:30 and 10. I try to be asleep between 10 and 10:30. I'm up between 5:30 and 6 in the morning. First thing I do when I wake up is I go pray, and I meditate, I journal, and I sit down with sort of what are my buckets to do. And then I understand how to do the things that I don't want to do most. I find priorities is usually about figuring out what's the thing that you're avoiding doing.
Eat the frog.
Yeah, it's the most important thing to do. And then, there's a lot of variability when you're a founder in terms of the things that you have to do on a daily basis. And so, as much as possible, sort of having those rituals and practices that allow you to ground yourself, understand what are the things to do, short, medium, and long term goals, and continue to operate in a way as if you haven't won yet. Because we haven't, right? Like, sure, we've raised a bunch of money, but like a lot of people have raised a bunch of money. I know, people within particularly the privacy space, one of what people would call the competitors in Alio raised 10 times more than we have. Aztec has raised 6 or 7 times more than we have. Raising itself doesn't indicate anything. A16Z is involved in both Alio and in Aztec. That doesn't indicate a win. And to me, I've had conversations privately where people talk about Alio and Aztec as competitors, and I see them as people that we're working with. We all want to see a privacy-first way for blockchains to succeed. Why would I see them as my competitors? I see them as people who have a shared vision of the future. And so, to me, yeah, on a daily basis, nothing has changed. I think I do my best to be grateful for the position that I'm in, because I do recognize that many people, including myself from the past, would look and go, man, I wish one day I get to the place that like so-and-so has invested in me, or that I've raised this kind of money, or that these are the valuations, or these are the companies that I'm talking to. And so if anything, I just try to remember to be grateful, because it keeps me humble and hardworking, and remember that I haven't won yet, and that what winning even means is so abstract. Because if I'm not really chasing money, then winning doesn't necessarily mean we just launch a token that's successful and I become personally wealthy. What does success even look like, and how do I build towards that? And so, yeah, I know that's not again, like one of the very clear answers, but it is definitely how
it's a real answer, which is more than can be said of, us. I think that's why I do this, is like understand how people in your position like see things, because I think a lot of people don't know what it's like.
It's fair.
I really like what you said, that it's the beginning, because I think it's kind of like leadership. If you see becoming the leader of something as an end of itself, and you see the beginning as the goal, then you'll never reach the end. Right?
Totally. I couldn't agree more. I mean, if you think about like, when Zuck, raised that first amount of money for Facebook going on, 2 decades ago now? And now you think about the level of success that he's attained and things that he's done, the fact that he's stayed in the position of being a founder who still leads things. To me, he went on a multi-decade journey. Had he decided early in his career that he had already won when he collected a few checks, he would not be where he is now.
No, definitely.
He's continually looking for the next big challenge. And so, let's say like many of the founders who are, collect 8 figures inside of a year because they do shady things with the token launch and OTC. And sure, they made $30 or $50 million after taxes. It's less. Is that really having won?
No, I don't think so. Because in the end, there's like the hierarchy of stuff, which is, you can have like status. I would argue I think money is below status, because people with money compete for status.
And people are always trying to buy it. Like, how do you use money to buy that status?
Exactly. So I think it goes like money and then status. The best example of this is VC Twitter, right? Yeah. They are desperate to be, I don't mean like the greats like Azeem, I mean like kind of the other ones that maybe compete to be relevant or have think pieces or try and whatever. And it's okay, because I think it's good. It's a good thing to like try and find purpose. But then above status is power.
Yeah.
And I think that's basically just can you affect the world? And I think what Zuck has done so well is like he stayed at the top of his game for so long, and nailing AI, the WhatsApp acquisition, Instagram, like all of these plays have been consistently bangers.
Consistently.
And even the VR stuff, like I think it's just an interface issue rather than a technology issue. Like they will probably be
Oculus
early.
is an amazing, well, it's not called Oculus anymore. I think the MetaQuest is the name now. Oculus was another one of his acquisitions that ahead of its time was amazing. But you go pick up one of the MetaQuests, it's actually fascinating as a device.
Yep.
So he's someone I look to as an example of like, and he also, it wasn't very long ago that their stock was in the gutter and people thought Microsoft would just buy them.
Absolutely.
And in the last few months, he's hit all-time highs.
Yeah.
And so,
and he's winning the AI hiring war.
Yeah. I mean, the Alex Wang move, being able to pull people away from OpenAI, like, and so, and by the way, just as a note on that, it is fascinating that we are starting to see what feel like will be like football level salary caps.
Dude, I was just about to say sports teams.
It's sports teams, right? It's literally turning into sports teams where, we're going to sign you for $100 million
with
over
a bonus.
Yeah. And so, those are the kinds of things that I like, I've been looking at, and I'm like, those wars are coming. They're not going to stay just within, the massive companies. They're going to come everywhere where people will start to expect these kinds of like huge outsized returns, even when they're not the founders. But going back to him, and I don't know. I just try to treat every day like it's my first. Like stay hungry, stay hustling, stay trying to figure it out. And I think that as long as you treat everything like it's your first project, then you're more likely to just end out in a better place.
Let's talk about the privacy side of things.
Yeah.
So, I like to, whenever I do like a talk or a slide at a conference, I always say, what's my history? Why do I do this? I show one slide, with a quote from Hal Finney, the freedom to transact is fundamental for like human freedom, right?
Yeah.
And the privacy around that, who controls the money, I think that's a foundational thing, why I love the whole thing in the first place.
Yeah.
On the other side, the next slide is always in it for the tech meme of the guy like just all dressed in gold.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Like this is one of the industries, I believe like industries are like rivers, right? Some are flowing faster than others. And if you're like, you were saying before we were talking, like when you recommend to people to get into the business, it's because they have a skill set outside of this business that they could arguably turn their time into a lot more in this business.
Than
right?
other industries will give them for the same skill set. Yeah.
Which is a very smart thing to do.
Yeah.
But tell me, like, what does privacy mean for you? Like, why are you doing this?
I just think that the idea that the way blockchains work at the moment, inevitably going back to the logic trees we were talking about, leads to dystopia.
Yes.
The idea that every single financial transaction, and then using smart contracts, it's not just financial transactions, it's everything that gets done. Bitcoin is just a ledger of money movement. Ethereum and everything forward with smart contracts is that you can add other data to it. The idea that absolutely every single little thing that we do would be available on public ledgers for everyone to analyze and assess. And now further in this state of AI where maybe right now it would take more complex AI skills, but inside of 3 years, 5 years, it would be easy for anyone to spin up a Chainalysis type movement using an AI agent that can understand every single thing about someone that they're doing on chain. It's really scary. And I think that a big part of why so many folks don't realize it is because those of us in the West who use blockchains do so as blockchains being the cherry on top of already the personal financial system we already have access to with bank accounts and credit cards and debit cards and PayPal and Venmo and Square, whatever it is. And so to me, I think it's sort of an afterthought to have privacy because we already have privacy.
Yeah.
And so when we think about blockchains, we don't think about privacy first because like the idea of privacy for our actual financial lives is already baked in. And when I think about the extension of blockchains becoming the way that everyone starts to potentially transact on a back end, I just don't see there being a way that we scale a world where everyone's on blockchain without there being privacy, And that goes down to, it's not necessarily just about hiding. I don't know if someone has OnlyFans transactions, but it's like, do you really want everyone to know, your Chipotle transactions? No. And when you think about companies coming online, does it make sense that if Apple wanted to do everything on blockchains and have all their balances on blockchains, that every single time that they decided to move a little bit of money or pay a service provider or do something, that they would have to put out a press release about every little thing that was going on? No, absolutely not. Like, the idea of price fluctuations in Apple stock price because people didn't understand, money that they moved to pay a provider, which caused the stock price to go down. Like, that would be horrendous.
100%.
And that's the place that we're in right now when the Ethereum Foundation tries to move money around. There's just these assumptions. They sell huge panics, right? And so I think without getting into the technical details of it, privacy is just something that we absolutely need. And the way that Miden's going about building a private, scalable, yet compliant way to do blockchains seems like the way that we have to go, the inevitability or where blockchains need to be, because if not, we're not building for a future that I'm excited by if we don't have privacy. And so to me, it is important for us not to become a dystopia.
Yes. And that's a great mission. And I love your use of the word inevitability. I think there's a lot of power in that, especially with Bitcoin, privacy. One thing that's really interesting with privacy is it depends on what your personality is, right?
Yeah.
Because some people understand it deeply. And maybe that comes from like a prepper mentality. Like, I love zombie movies, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes, I watched 28 Years Later recently, Danny Boyle, amazing director. When I go into like a shopping center, I'll be thinking like, where are the exits? How will I get out if something happens? Sometimes I have daydreams about like, if the zombie apocalypse did happen, like, where would I actually go? How would I survive?
Yeah.
And I think there is an element of that carries over into privacy, because the biggest thing that people say who is not in crypto, that when I say them talk about privacy or even stuff like ads or AI or whatever, is like, oh, I've got nothing to hide. And it's always with someone who's in a privileged place, right?
100%. 100%. And that's what I think of, for the most part, the users in the West who have been using blockchains for years now, is that's why I even think that we play for the most part, these speculation games and fun speculation games, instead of thinking about how, people in Sri Lanka and Pakistan could more properly use blockchains, which actually would be onboarding millions, if not tens of hundreds of millions of people into the global financial system, is that mostly people who are extremely privileged, thinking about how they can do 100x instead.
Yep.
And that's what I think has slowed the progress so much of where blockchains could be. But I really just can't imagine a world being a good world where we had blockchains as the inevitability without privacy also being part of it.
Because if your financial transaction was visible, with the metadata that intelligence agencies have, you have complete control. There's a great book by Alexander Pomerantsev that's called "Everything is Possible, Nothing is True." I think that's the title. I could be wrong, but he's basically speaking about the Soviet Union and kind of the KGB era of. And I read "Man in the High Castle" recently, amazing book. But essentially, that when you have these big swings in politics towards autocracy and power, and people looking for a strong leader, there is a natural debt cycle, like what Ray Dalio talks about how, people try and consolidate this power, the country gets poorer, and then the government has to have more and more and more control.
Yeah.
And the only way that, like, I think that if the Soviet Union had AI and computer chips, the extensibility of control and power would be absolute.
100%.
They would not have fallen, I don't think. I think they would have had complete control of the population.
Interesting.
Chips and AI.
Those are things that are scary to me when I look around. And so to me, the idea of adding privacy to what, 20 years from now, maybe it takes, it's going to take a long time because it's still very much a toy.
Yeah.
But we just need privacy.
On that note, there's a big proliferation of non-decentralized chains, right? Arguably, the Robinhood L3, for example, or to some extent Hyperliquid. It's a 3 out of 5 multi-sig. Yep. I love Hyperliquid, don't get me wrong. I love the ecosystem, I love the builders, but we seem to care less and less about this stuff.
Until we do.
So like, how are people going to care about privacy? Is it up to enterprise? Is it up to us? Like, how do we get it to be built into stuff?
That's a hard one, because I don't think you'll be able to generally get the mass consumer to care. I think it's just being able to hopefully build things that are able to win out and in that time that are protecting those people without them knowing really that you're building for their protections, right? When you're thinking about those protections as you're building those things, because it won't matter till it does. And then when it does matter, everyone will ask, well, why did we head down this direction where things are like this? And so the best that we can do, at least, what we're trying to do is win in a way that will help protect people without them sort of knowing that we're building it for them in that way.
So would you say kind of like the hero that this city needs? We're
Sort
talking
of.
about Batman.
Sort of, yeah.
Because people don't know they need to be saved with this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If there was a choice between a DEX, for example, I mean, even not a DEX, like an app that was a little bit more expensive because it was decentralized and private versus something that's fast, cheap, but it's literally just an Excel spreadsheet on someone's computer.
Yeah.
How do people make that choice? So I guess that we have to get this part cheaper, faster, and more convenient and private.
And that's exactly what we're trying to do. Is how do you make something that you don't have to sacrifice the things that people don't want to sacrifice so that they can get privacy, so that making the decision is more seamless, because then it's offering you the same exact things while also still offering you privacy and compliance, right? Like at the same time, because we do very much want to operate in a world where there are regulations and there are, I think it's one of the things where some of the more decentralization maxis might disagree with me, but I do think that we need regulations. I do think that we need governments involved in these things. I think that many of the bad things have occurred because we don't have any of those things. And so, what does that look like? Well, that's tough, but I do think that those things are necessary. And so how do we go about doing things in a way that allows for decentralization, allows for scalability, allows for privacy? It's definitely a high promise, but it's sort of the thing that we feel is necessary. And so we're trying to create the world that we think should exist.
That's a great mission to have. With the way the world's going, it's really tough to know where that's going to come from.
Yeah.
Where do you see kind of the biggest wins in the space for privacy?
Onboarding large financial institutions. I think that they naturally need to operate in a world where there is privacy baked in. Goldman Sachs is not the type that's going to want everything that they do on a blockchain to be public. And so I think that the largest wins will probably come from where the most capital is sitting and the most capital movement is occurring, and the people who understand the capital markets the best and what that looks like to slowly but surely bring those companies on chain in a way that they feel comfortable with, but that also gives them and affords them that. I think it's a huge win. I think they're few and far between to get those wins. Closing those deals and being able to bring them to fruition is way more difficult than it is to be able to, find a way to create a 100x machine that onboards retail capital, right?
Absolutely.
And it's a more thankless job, but each win is worth so many other smaller wins. And so it goes against the grain of what's been done to date, because it's usually how do you create a situation where retail can onboard, create those 10, 100,000x opportunities for people, get everyone excited, make, a DEX or Coinbase or Solana or something like the number one app on an app store. And then when enough people get rugged, it sort of goes away.
There's always a counterparty to 100x, right? Someone's buying the 100x you want. Right?
Yeah. So, someone is exit liquidity. And so
exactly.
How do you close deals with the kinds of organizations that create that sustainability? Perhaps won't offer the same 100x's anymore, but that's not, building out the world for 100x's solely for 100x's isn't really what we're looking to do. It doesn't mean that there won't be 100x's involved.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that that's sort of how you go about doing it, getting those huge players involved who are managing trillions in assets in a way where a single one of those companies bringing potentially all of their assets on chain would multiply the trillions that exist fully in crypto at the moment.
Because this is like in Succession when Roy is like, you are not serious people. I think that is the change that's happening.
Yeah.
Like the industry is becoming more serious, which is awesome, which I love to see. But on the flip side, there is like a nostalgia that we're losing to some extent, which is I hope will still remain in a small way.
I think it will, but
I think it will.
I think it will, but it's a natural evolution. It's
Exactly.
a maturation of the space.
Yeah.
That things will not be like they were in 2017.
And they shouldn't, you know.
They
like,
shouldn't.
I don't want a random coin for dentist to come back.
No.
And I don't want the Polonius troll box as much as I loved it.
Yeah.
Or the Roger Ver and Yihan, you know, shouting about Bitcoin Cash on the timeline. Like, so much nostalgia, loved it. But I'm also glad, like, Gary Gensler was such a hated figure, right? And he did put the space really far back, because ironically, second order outcomes, like an interesting story about this that's relevant to like India, is because when the Brits were running India, they said there's too many cobras, right? And they were like, okay, cool, let's just put a bounty on cobras. And initially the cobras went down because people were like killing cobras and bringing them in, but then cobra numbers went up. So the fact that they put on a bounty on cobras meant that people were
started
just breeding
them?
yeah, breeding cobras, which is kind of like what happens with DeFi and emissions and incentives and these short-term 100x's. So the point is that, yes, Gensler was hated, and yes, he put things way back by forcing these strange foundation labs entities and then essentially having no clear value accrual to the token. But like, you know, the Argentina situation is still not a good thing. It's a net bad thing.
Totally.
And I think that the discourse and the timeline is that anyone who says, like, I love the phrase, but I also am very aware that anyone who says no crying in the casino is either the casino or benefits from the casino,
Totally.
or is harvesting exit liquidity.
Totally. 100%.
And that has to stop to get to the next place.
Absolutely.
And I guarantee there will be comments under this saying, it's okay for you to say, but who are you to stop us from like trying to chase escapes from our world, right?
Yeah.
And the solution is not to like build a bigger casino, is to like make the escape from the world possible by making people, you know, free, able to work on what they enjoy. And maybe that's utopian, I don't know. But like, I think that's a better mission than a bigger casino.
Same here. Dude,
I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you so much for doing it.
Thank you for having me, man. I'm super glad we were able to make this happen.
I always like to position this as a way for me to learn and for people who are watching to learn, right?
Yeah.
We've talked about a lot of lessons and a lot of things. If there's one thing you could say to maybe someone who's young, who wants to get into the space, or is already in the space and wants to like get to a point where they're doing something fulfilling, what advice would you give them that they can, like, as their North Star, do?
Play long-term games with long-term people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this industry makes people play short-term games with short-term people. And when you do that, you get categorized as such. And when you're younger and you're hungry and you're looking for a win, thinking that the short-term solution can be really interesting to take is one approach, but realizing that that has consequences is something to really take into account. And so for me, the biggest thing would be, playing long-term games and finding other long-term people, because you're not playing to win this for 6 months. You're planning to win this for your career, and careers are long periods, hopefully. And so I think that would be my biggest insight for anyone who's trying to come into this.
That applies to anything, I think. It's so
Yeah.
universal. Like, there's a very immediate like relation to that, where someone that used to work for me essentially quit because he was really unhappy about seeing his friends who were gambling on hyperliquid shitcoins
Okay.
were making like 50 grand in a day, right? And he was like, this is unfair. I can't do this. And he actually, you know, exactly what you were saying, he saw that kind of advice as something to be cynical about. That, you know, these people say these things, but really the game is to, you know, you got to win, and then you can say these things. But like, hearing you say that made me think of like Steve Jobs' quote, which is "Stay hungry, stay foolish," which I think being foolish is kind of a good thing, because you're not doing what everyone else thinks you should do.
Yeah.
And I think that fits with long-term games.
Totally. You have to be able to be delusional.
Yeah. You have to, To be a good founder, you need to be
You have to have a
delusional.
certain level of delusional, or like the younger people say, delulu, right?
Yeah.
You have to maintain a certain level of that.
100%, dude. Dude, I think we'll call it there.
All right, man.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you for doing that.